Minuting that we'd like to congratulate Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II on her Platinum Jubilee. Achieving 70 years on the throne is no mean thing. 4 days of celebration, I personally think has been great for this country, and I do feel that support for the monarchy has never been stronger. So let's hope she's here for a few more years yet. So, start the meeting. Are there any apologies for absence? Chris is going to be here.
Chairman, well, Chris Church will be arriving at some point. When he, we think he's found Salford. Whether he finds the village hall or not. I think the first thing is whether he finds somewhere to park. And then the second thing is
we'll make a start. He's not going to miss a great deal, I don't think. Okay. Any more apologies? No. Okay, item 1, appointment of Vice Chairman. I will move Jennifer Purcell, Councillor Jennifer Purcell.
I second that, Chairman.
Any more nominations?
I'll nominate Councillor David Whip. I think it's wholly appropriate as we have balance of power here at the Steering Committee. Disregarding the chairmanship, that we have the second position of Vice Chairman going to a Liberal Democrat.
Okay, I've got second for that. Yeah, okay.
Chairman, could I just say, Tom's made the point about the committee being balanced in terms of the elected Pendle representatives. The issue that we discussed at the last meeting was the inconsistency of yourself and your Conservative colleagues in saying last year, well, we got the most votes, so therefore we should appoint a chairman. But when it gets to this year, the group that got the most votes, quite clearly, are the Liberal Democrats. So what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. Now, I don't think that in the case of the West Craven Area Committee, there will be any form of power sharing whatsoever, not even on the Northern Ireland model. So the post of Vice Chairman of the committee is of no great consequence. But I do think it's fundamentally wrong for the Conservatives to impose a chairman, as they did at the full council meeting just a couple of weeks ago, and for us to end up with a Conservative-run West Craven Area Committee, a Conservative-run Pendle Council, which you've got sufficient votes there. You've got a Conservative-run County Council, you've got a Conservative government. Well, quite frankly, everybody knows where to go to complain because everything's done by the Conservatives. So whenever anything goes wrong, as it does, I think people will know who to blame. In the sense of that, my filibuster has lasted long enough for Chris Church to enter the room, so I will stop my remarks.
Well, that's your opinion, Councillor Whip, and you're quite entitled to it, or totally disagree with it. But anyway, so we've got an amendment in, it's been moved and seconded that Councillor Whip is the Vice Chair. Are all those in favour?
Chairman, well, those comments were wholly inappropriate for the Chairman to make.
Oh, shut up, mate. I know what you mean. Shut up.
You're supposed
Can I
to
just tell that again, please?
not making snide remarks after this.
Well, it works both ways. But anyway, let's move on.
So, I understand. What did you say, Chairman? Because I wasn't saying
I
much
just said you're quite entitled to make a comment. I said, but I don't agree with them.
Right. Do you not think that the
No,
role...
we're not going into debate about this.
Do you not think that the role of chair is to chair the meeting in an impartial way in order to facilitate the business.
And I'm quite still entitled to my comments as well.
Yes, I quite understand that, but obviously you've provoked Councillor Tomley by what you've said. I mean, why?
We're not, look, we're going to go to the vote now on this. All those in favour of Councillor Whitby being Vice Chair?
Jodie, you can't vote. Sorry, Jodie's new.
It's okay. All those against? That is lost. I will use my casting vote. So, to the main motion, Councillor Jenny Purcell being Vice Chair. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. Right. Item 2, declarations of interest. Anybody got any declarations of interest? Nope. Okay. Item 3, public question time. Is there any members of the public here wishing to ask something that is not on the agenda? Nope. Okay. Minutes of the last meeting. Got a seconder. Thank you. Okay, item 5, police and community safety issues. You've got the crime figures and they have been circulated by email as well. You've got Sergeant Stuart Banks and Neil here. Okay, if you can just go through the figures first. Have you got any questions that you want to ask? Yes, Councillor.
Looking at the sheet, the figures for May 2022 compared to May 2021, in total, last year there were 66 crimes reported. This year, 103, which is obviously it's 37 increase, but I mean that's the percentage increase there is well over 50%, and I wonder whether Sergeant Banks, who's hiding away across there, could sort of give us any information. And I'm aware that Stuart is not in this role.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about this first if you want, just the figures, which obviously I've looked at myself. But leading to that, we are in a period of change within the local neighbourhood policing team, including the gentleman that used to produce the crime figures, Jeff Dickinson, who retired at 31st of March. That's now fallen to one of the community support officers who's on restricted duties. So her figures and the way that she's produced them are different than how Jeff did, in as much as, without trying to sort of go into too much detail, the way we record crime, it's counted on our system similar to the way we record non-crime investigations, which is where the difference in the tallies comes. By that I mean, if you ring up and report criminal damage to your property, you used to get a crime number and it would be called a crime report. Now it's called an investigation, and it's counted along with someone who's rung up and said, I want to report my son missing from home. That is an investigation. So I've had a chat today with Kinga, who's doing these figures, to say to her they need to be a little bit more, for me anyway, easier to decipher. If I come to a meeting, I want to be able to say, look, this is how many people have their houses broken into, this is how many people have the cars broken into, this is how many assaults, and this is what they were. Now, I will explain those figures to you, but it's just to sort of put a little bit of context, and especially with the disparity of last year, which I obviously picked up on as well straight away. That's the explanation for it. And if I go into those figures now, if that's okay with yourselves, they are quite low figures in general. I believe we were still in lockdown in May last year. So, for me, the neighbourhood policing team, I want to know, have we got a pattern of crime for burglaries? Have we got somebody who's coming in, which we do get occasionally, coming in from generally different areas of the northwest, taking things like quad bikes, attacking rural properties around here. And that has happened recently. It hasn't happened in the last month. Okay. Same with burglaries in people's houses. There are more figures and there's no patterns. When it comes to things like assaults, the way that they're recorded, if two children are fighting at a playground, that counts as another tick, as well as someone who's been attacked in the street when they come out of the pub. So that's how these things are counted. So I then start looking into those and think, have we got, somebody going around attacking people, assaulting people? We haven't. We get a couple of incidents from licensed premises, which you're going to get when people have been to the pub, but certainly nothing jumping out of the ordinary. With antisocial behaviour and nuisance, that is something that we constantly look at because it's an age-old problem, and we have lots of different ways that we look at trying to address that, including antisocial driving as well, which is the electric motorbike, the way that that's linked with drugs as well, people going onto parks and dealing drugs. So we're looking at different ways of tackling that, and we still will do. Things like, we had an operation a couple of weeks ago called Stay Safe, where we would go out, and this particular one was in Cole, we're going to do it every couple of months in different areas of Pendle, including here. That involves social services, working with the police, working with our safeguarding team, and basically looking for these children we think are vulnerable. Because you'll get your ringleaders, won't you? But you will get children who are sort of being carried along, who are at risk of child sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation, and then we'll take those back to a safe place with social workers there, parents down, and see if we can look at that problem from that point of view. That doesn't say we're not going to target people who think are committing crime. We don't get it right all the time, I know it. But that's just sort of a bit of an explanation of the crime figures that we've got and what we're currently doing about it. Just to move on from there, quite right, I will be leaving this role in sort of the end of July. There's a new sergeant starts on the 1st of July, which is James Cooper. He'll be responsible for your area. And as I discussed with the change that's been going on, there has been a lot of change. A lot of the police officers have retired. The community support officers have moved on. Thankfully, you've got some continuity with Neil. We want another community support officer for this area. And yesterday, you had a new police officer start for your area, which is PC Andy Wyatt. So he's new to the area, but he's an experienced police officer. He's worked commonly in the area before as an immediate response officer, so he knows the area. He's been out and about on foot today in Barnolds with Neil, which is what we want to see more of, and let him get stuck into tackling the problems in your area.
Okay, thank you. Any more on crime figures? Or do you want to come back? No? Councillor?
Thanks, Chair. Just from that, I'd like to thank you for bringing up about the proactive approach you take. And I think that really is vitally important. The best way to stop crime is prevent it, that sort of early intervention work. And I mean, I'd quite like to see Pendle Council ensure and put pressure on that continues to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we can take that away. On the crime figures, does this include, well, obviously last year's will, bans on the square? No.
It's 3 years since.
Oh, is it included? This is for me, so it hasn't got this year's bans on the square as well. I don't know if you want to discuss that seems to go quite well as far as...
Yeah, I mean that was my ask. I mean, has it been okay from the policing perspective? Have you had a lot of trouble? Have you not?
Well, we're going to do a bit of a debrief regarding that, because obviously this year it was on a public holiday, and it cost money to police. Unfortunately, we have to look at that from that point of view as well and try and get a proportionate response, which we thought we'd have this year. It's really well organised. Everyone I've spoke to is complimentary. There was the odd problem with some young people, somebody taking home, getting drunk and a little bit out of hand, but nothing that significant. So, like I said, we will do, the police will debrief that, but that's where we're at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Purcell.
Yes, I'll just go off at this. We've got still with these boy racers or whatever you call them, but these were two gentlemen on two motorbikes leaving Barnoldswick. We were going out of Barnoldswick, overtook us again where the petrol station is on Calbrook Road. I managed to get one registration number. They turned into the new building, well, the new estate here in Salterford. Then they overtook everybody down the main road, round Kelbrook, onto Skipton Road, I think you call it, through Fallridge. I don't know how they managed not to kill or cause a serious accident with the way they were driving. Same with motor cars, up Manchester Road, same there. Speeding, I was out with an officer from Lancashire County Council to see if we could get something done about it. And whilst he was stood there, they were going above the speed limit. Now, I've spoken with residents up there and they've said, how can we get something to slow these sort of people down? And his answer was, there's not much they can do, but at the end of the day, it's not a case of what they can't do, it's what we should be doing, and that is slowing these sort of people down.
I totally agree, and I know where I live as well, and you'll see the speed in the van, which will, everyone flashes the lights at each other when that comes along, which I find a bit strange, because they're probably the same people who complain about speeding. But that's temporary, and he moves on, or she moves on to another place. For me, the key of that is there's different things, and there's people who are generally speeding, and then there's what I class as the antisocial ones who just are out razzing. We all see it. The one thing like I mentioned with the antisocial behaviour, and again though it is temporary, it moves around. We'll put like stop check sites in. To stop vehicles, get them examined to see if they're stolen, get them examined to see if they're fit to be on the road, get the documents of the drivers or riders examined as well. But it's permanent sort of fixtures that are needed, and as far as Lancashire County Council, I believe, will be the folk to put in. Like I say, I live where I live, so we'll do our stuff and we'll gather information, and if you do see that, report it to us. You might not always get someone coming out, you might not even, but a lot of them are created with the registration numbers on, and it builds a bit of a picture for us where we can put it together, and if the vehicle's seen or goes through one of the automatic number plate recognition cameras, it'll pop up, antisocial behaviour, drivers have been given a warning, you can get the vehicles to pop and stuff like that.
And also the other one question for you is the antisocial behaviour around Victory Park.
Yeah.
It's still ongoing, and the residents around there, elderly as well, have got fed up of it all. I mean, it's something that we're going to have to learn and find a solution for this.
Yeah.
And it's not that, it's just like what you said. You've got your ringleader, and then you've got these younger ones coming through. As soon as they leave these junior schools, they go to big school and you've got to come in our gang type of thing, or if you don't, you're not cool enough. I mean, you only have to see, look at some of these children. They're not old enough to be, in this sort of
it's a societal problem, isn't it?
It's all over.
And it is something that,
I mean,
I said to you, we don't leave that with me, I'll sort it for you, because
you can't.
But we will continue to try and do that, not just the Victory Park. We want people to bring in, and this is one thing I'd say to folk, you can only be on hold for 40 minutes, I know that, and I can't stop that. But if you're ringing up or you're reporting stuff online, then every month my bosses are coming to me going, why have we got 20 calls, for example, about it? Well, they're not at the minute, we're not. So it needs to be on the radar. And
also you need more support. I've been in touch with the police commissioner about having more bobbies around this area, because with Pendle Road we're very wide and we don't see a policeman until we have an event or something. I mean, I was quite shocked when I saw two policemen the I think it was either Sunday it was, and they was walking on rain or road and had a good natter. And like I said, we need more support for you.
I'd like to have police officers on every street.
I know, but it's not going to happen.
No.
Anyway, thank you very much for that.
Councillor Oscar.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going back to the figures, and apologies if you covered this. I'm not sure I picked it up, but and thanks for your explanation as to why those numbers add up to 49 and there's 54 missing crimes in there. My concern is that's okay for tonight because you've been through why those figures don't add up, but obviously we were all alarmed when we saw that figure, and my concern is what's going to happen for future meetings. Are we going to get something consistent? Because what will happen if for some operational reasons there wasn't a police officer here, we'd all be looking at that and thinking there's 54 missing crimes, and what are they all about, and is it a misprint, or the potential that you might have to just explain yourself every time you come here, or you and your successor will. So I just wonder if is there going to be some consistency? You either report all 103 and explain what they are, or just the 49 that are counted. And
I'm speaking with Claire Pearson, the inspector, tomorrow, because the same things apply for each area and been provided the same way. So it's crazy, isn't it, to even explain it. So I just wanted to be quite simple and to the point as well. I even thought about, do we need to compare them with last year, or are they appropriate? So we'll think about it to make sure that they are correct,
Okay, Councillor.
Thanks, Chairman. I put my hand up again because I thought we'd moved on to the human safety issue section. But dodging back to the figures, and with respect to what Paul has just said, I think he's misunderstood the figures, because the residential burglary, commercial burglary, etc., are just a selection of crime types which are listed individually. The all crime figure is all the crimes that have been reported, and there are other crime categories which are not individually identified. So there aren't a missing number of crimes. They are crimes that are out with the detailed list that's above.
no, sorry, my just figures when I looked at the main ones last year, the all crime figure across there is the total of the numbers above it, and it has always been, whereas this time obviously it isn't.
I think that may be coincidental.
Okay, I
I
just
do need to apologise.
Yeah. Sorry.
You got the figures before I did. We need to sort it out for next time. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Either way.
I do want to address a couple of other issues, but just still on the figures, and I refrained from saying this earlier on, but as an old lad, the police are renowned for changing the way in which they count things, so you can never go, you can't see the trends over time, because there's been a change in recording practices, or the government, the Home Office have changed this and that and the other, and it is classic obfuscation, and I'm not having a pop here at all, but you do want to see whether the trend is that crimes are going up, crimes are going down. I'm peering round to see Stuart there. It's not you, it's Tom. So it is helpful to compare year on year, and that helps you to see what is going on, and if there is an issue coming up that you need to be addressing.
I agree with you, because I've done the job for 30 years, and I've seen the way that we do record a crime, or are instructed to record a crime. Someone who sent somebody a message via Facebook and then had an argument with them in the street, but once upon a time wouldn't have hit our books. It would have been advised to somebody. Now you can end up with a public order offence, a malicious communications offence, and an assault, 3 out of 1 incident. And that's the way that the crimes are. We haven't got a choice. The Home Office guidelines. So just going back to that for next time, we'll just try and get it so that it's sort of these crimes that you give them in context. Like I said, how many people have their eyes brought into? How many people have been assaulted?
Just moving on then to the human safety issues. Jennifer mentioned Manchester Road in Barnoldswick, and I understood Councillor Church asked for that as an agenda item, or did you raise it at the last meeting? I can't remember.
I did raise it at the last meeting, yes. In general, it was a request that something be done and attention be paid to it.
Yeah, I've just checked back on the minutes. There's no action against Manchester Road. So I wonder whether we could specifically pick it up. And Jennifer's had a highway officer there, not police officer, highway authority officer there. So what other, perhaps we could ask formally of the county council what action are they going to take?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do that.
That's that one. Vis-a-vis speeding generally, and I think this is since the last meeting of this committee, I met with the Lancashire Road Safety Partnership people who deal with average speed cameras, and in amongst I reiterated our request for average speed cameras both along the A56 and along Skipton Road and along Calgut Road. I wonder whether it would be sensible for us to further our request, add on Manchester Road as a route as well, and say, please, can the Road Safety Partnership, this is Lancashire Road Safety Partnership, consider providing average speed cameras on all of those routes. So we're adding Manchester Road on. We've already said we want A56 from Colne through to Wiswick. We've got Skipton Road in Barnoldswick from the county boundary through, and Calgut Road from Calgut through to Barnoldswick, and we've got Manchester Road. So can we resolve to do that,
Yeah.
Chair?
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you. And then people have mentioned motorcycles or electric motorcycles. I mean, Councillor Tomwick's going to kick me on the table, but I've sat far enough away from him, can't. But I'm quite alarmed at the electric scooters that are whizzing around, and almost bowling people off the feet. But of equal concern is the risk of them going into a car or going under a car. Now Tom will take the car's fault, but I think there is quite a lot of issues with the electric scooters, and they whiz away at such speed. I dare say Neil's going to struggle to run after him. And I'm not picking you out, Neil, but
Maybe Neil needs an electric scooter.
I've educated 3 of them yesterday.
you've educated. Have you learned how to ride one?
No,
Have you learned how to ride one?
no, if you'd like to purchase one from the police and back you all up, I'm happy to ride one.
You shouldn't have mentioned that, because I would point out that Barnoldswick Town Council many moons ago purchased a speed gun, which we have got to remind you every now and again that it was purchased for use in West Craven, not to get taken nowhere and never come here again. The last thing, Chairman, on a positive note, was to say a big thank you, as Tom has, for the policing presence at Bands on the Square. As one of the organisers, I can't remember if others were involved, but there were 2 or 3 of us met with the police, and we had the operation manager, Khan, who was in the meeting, and I've got quite alarmed because he's like, superintendent. Is it chief superintendent?
Superintendent.
He's a super. So, it's the sort of second in command of the division in our meeting for policing, and I'm thinking, oh my, what's happening here? Anyway, the message that we got back, which is quite a few weeks ago, was, we can't really promise anything, subsequently, they did set up, I think they had 3 carriers, and they were policing events across the division, so including Clitheroe and Clitheroe, ourselves, and I think Darwin as well. And I think they did a really good job.
Yeah.
And it's not for this committee to thank them, but I'm sure that Stu can feed that back,
Yeah,
because it was a good job, it was well done, and I'm sure the other event organisers would be similarly pleased with the presence that we had. I don't know whether, Amanda, you had police at your wild party at Erie Feast, but whether you needed
No, it
them.
wasn't. Okay. Councillor Church?
Yeah, yes, it's almost past now. Through you, I was just going to ask about the changeover in the types of figures. I know in the ideal world we'd have thought about this 3 months ago and said, could you do the overlap month in both forms? But it's too late now. Informally, from what you've seen on the ground, do you see any particular trend in here that ought to be brought to our attention?
No, in a word. We do get patterns, but some of them, when you look at them and look at the offences that are coming, they could be neighbours constantly arguing. It could be, and it has been, the same children causing issues, where this is minor damage caused. So, whilst you could say they are patterns, there's things that we do try and nip in the bud very, very quickly. I'm more alarmed when I come in and private people say that I've got a burglar in my house, or people in the town centres or village centres are saying there's somebody going around committing crime against people or women or children, that kind of stuff, and there isn't that nature to report to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just while we're on, taking up what you said about urging people to ring and getting it on paper, so that people can see the statistic and overall. Yes, I applaud that entirely. Are you talking about a 111 call?
Yeah, unless it's an emergency.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Then it's 999 if there's a serious threat to property or a person. And then they can ring 101 and click or online. It still comes through. They do. It does work. It's we used to have people who worked in bar at the police station who would answer the phone and get a call, and that's long gone. It's all either headquarters with contact management, call takers, or online, but they do come through.
So the message is people really shouldn't sit back and say, oh well, they're going to do no, so we won't bother reporting it.
I get why people say that.
Of course, yeah. And they should just get down and get it recorded, so that it becomes part of the overall picture to see the size of the problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just to come back to Councillor Wick, adding on, could we add on Gisborne Road, please, for the speed as well? Because we have the farmers coming down, up and down that road, and they aren't going at this 30 miles an hour. We've also got the boy races going down that way to 59.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Goldthorpe?
It's just a quickie. It's that time of year again. Earby, waterfalls, fires being lit, that sort of thing. A lot of kids going up there, enjoying themselves mainly, but there are the 1 or 2 others that have been causing issues over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and it will get worse. So if there's any chance at all of getting a regular look-see up there, as we used to do pre-COVID, I think it'd be a time well spent, particularly the sort of fires that they're lighting and where they're lighting them is a bit worrying. So yeah, doing a great job, but let's try and find out, particularly the waterfalls, which is a recreation area at the end of a road, way off the track, and it's a great place for people to disappear and enjoy themselves usually. But there has been quite a few instances of fires being lit up there and around the play equipment as well.
We have worked with the fire service in relation to, not just here but in other areas. I don't know what it is because why people are doing that, particularly now. But if these moors catch fire, it's catastrophic. So I spoke to a guy called Neil Hardiman, who's one of the leading fire officers around here. His eyes were like lit up, and it's there, we need to do something with this. So, you know, any information, I wonder if it's children and it's small, it's education.
Yeah.
So yeah, take that on board.
Good.
Well, the other week, somebody pitched a tent up there as well. So it went after a couple of days. Don't know who it was. Never saw anybody. But it needs a good watch to some waterfall. Councillor Whip.
Thanks, Chair. Just dodging back to the antisocial driving. I mean, obviously us here know quite a few of the spots in West Craven we want to see addressed. We've got the Road Safety Partnership, we've got LCC who could action some of those things, but we seem to have no way of getting through. I mean, we tried on Skipton Road, we came with an officer, we had a meeting, we discussed the problem, we tried to go through several solutions, and we still haven't had anything back from that. So I think we need to be asking LCC, asking the Road Safety Partnership, how do we get our concerns addressed in a way that, you know, is satisfying, and really bounce that back to them and say, you know, why can't you listen to us, sort of thing.
Okay. Councillor Hall.
Could just add with the fires as well, besides the waterfalls, have been on Rushden Avenue Playground, there's 2 on there. Someone told me of another one. The fire thing is getting quite frequent now, and on the playground equipment for the children, it was inside some of the things the little ones play with. It just been, and it was in the middle of the day, and we put them out, but it's like you don't know when they're going to do it, and you're not scared of doing it whenever it is. And it is, from what a lot of the little children said, it's the same. It's the same teenage. It would be good to get the fire service.
Well, we've been trying to get sort of into schools as well, to sort of, you know, if we can put together any kind of presentation to show what can happen.
Okay, Councillor.
Well, it's on this fire issue. I mean, with the best will in the world, I think going into primary schools is not targeting the age group of the teenagers, and I think it needs a bit more of a targeted intervention rather than trying to sort of educate everybody. The most recent incident that I didn't quite witness, but I did report it. Not the fire bit, because I didn't know about it at the time, but there were a group of youngsters hanging about around the bush shelter areas, Fernley Avenue, Station Road, Barnoldswick. And I mean, when I saw them, there were 30, 40 people, and they were trying to pull the hanging baskets down. But during that period, they were throwing what was probably lighter fluid into the bush shelter, throwing incendiary material in, and then sort of laughing at the consequences. Now that was witnessed by other people, so I wonder whether there's any scope for between the constabulary and the fire and rescue service, actually trying to have an operation that gets those kids engaged. I did have a conversation with fire and rescue about they brought in Colne, where there's been a similar issue. They brought a fire engine like down Waterside, South Valley, Youth Action Group. They've done that sort of thing, and they think that might be more of a way of engaging with them. So could you please look at that?
Yeah.
Maybe you could invite them to next meeting. We've got a partnerships officer, who will look at that kind of activity, absolutely.
Yeah. Does the committee want to do that?
Yeah.
think it's worthwhile or not?
It can't do any harm,
No.
but I mean, you've got use now committing arson,
Yeah.
basically. And it was on Facebook. Not only that, the zoomed it.
Yeah.
So the danger is one of those youths get hurt or you know, get themselves in the right mess. But it is across Pendle.
Yeah. Does it show the faces? Can they be identified? No.
To see.
No. That's a shame.
It's for us, it's sort of like anecdotally, there's been, in my opinion, a deterioration in behaviour since I came out of lockdown, not just children, but things like football matches and that, for some reason. It just seems to have got worse.
Yeah.
So whether it's the effects of that or not.
Okay. Alright, anybody got anything else? No? Well, thank you both for coming.
Yes, thank you.
And I hope we'll see you again next month.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for something more to the fire service.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6, planning application. And if it's okay with everybody, when we've done item 6, I want to move on to item 11. We've got a car here who wants to give us a presentation on the ball of moving master plan. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah? Okay. So, item 6, planning application, erection of free holiday lodges, associated parking access and amenity at the Greyhound, rear of the Greyhound, Manchester Road. We've got Mr Andrew Morgan here, who's the agent. If you want to speak, I can give you 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, members of the Council, following on from last month's deferral of this application, I hope that all the members have now had opportunity to visit the site and make their own assessment of the site. To briefly summarise what I said at last month's meeting, it is suggested by the officer that the development would result in a detrimental impact upon the refusal for the stability from a public vantage point. The officer states that any harmful impact would be less than substantial, and references the National Planning Policy Framework, which states that where a development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. The officer acknowledges that there will be some public benefit arising from the scheme in terms of contributions to the local economy, but this really doesn't appear to have been given proper consideration. The public benefits to this development are numerous and weigh strongly in favour of the proposal. These will include the continuous employment of tradespeople, cleaners and gardeners to maintain the development. The lodges will be occupied by families holidaying in the area, and it is estimated that if each family spent around £1,000 per week, this equates to a potential annual spend of £150,000 in local business in the town. The report also states that no public comments have been received. This is not true. There were no objections from neighbours and members of the public, but there was a letter of support from the Greyhound Club which welcomed the development, saying that it would encourage tourism into the area, which can only be a positive thing for businesses like ours. It is also noted that the development satisfies all of the considerations, namely residential amenity, highways, drainage, trees and ecology. Proposed by the applicant, the development will not cause any harm to the heritage asset. However, at worst, the harm identified by the plan officer is described as less than substantial, and as we have demonstrated, the public benefits from a small, sustainable tourism development would heavily outweigh this. I respectfully request that this area committee are mandated to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. We did have a site visit on this. Mr Watson, have you got anything that you want to add?
No, Chair. The only thing I would say in terms of the public benefits, that was part of the consideration that the inspector had last time. That was founded, so it wasn't, it is different here, but 3 houses give some public benefits, but if you find harm to the conservation area, obviously you have to weigh those up, Chairman. It has been a consideration at the appeal, and the inspector gave that little substance.
Okay, alright then, so committee, what do we want to do with this one? Anybody? Oh, make a long. Well, we did have a site visit and they are going to be quite visible and they are going to look out across the landscape, I'm afraid, is my feeling. So, Councillor Whip.
Thank you, Chair. I think question to Neil first. So I think the key issue to me is the transition of the urban Bonalswick to the open countryside in the situation of the conservation area. In open countryside, you have permitted development of outbuildings for farms, etc. If something like this was built more of a nature and the materials keeping to such buildings, would it be more acceptable in that place?
I think that the design isn't bad in itself. I think it's the encroachments that is the major issue. I think we're not saying recommending refusal in terms of design, which is a simple, good unit. There's no problem with that. It's the encroachment that's the issue.
Okay.
Chairman, just following Neil's comments there, it's a while since I looked at the planning application. I thought these were like wooden lodges.
Which is if this will, this machine will work. Playing with some unknown reason. The mouse, for whatever reason, has stopped working.
You can see it moving on the screen up there.
Can you?
Yeah.
No. I can't get it to work. And I haven't got the plans in front of me.
I think it must be in dual monitor mode. There you go. It was off here. If you imagine the projector was there.
Right. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, there you go. So it is stone. And obviously on slates. So they are very simple products. Kind of an alpine view of the product, but I don't think the design is a poor design in itself. It's very straightforward and simple.
Okay, so, Councillor Whip.
If that council was finished, because they asked a question.
Yeah. Following on from that, I mean, I do think that sort of design is in keeping with the setting, and obviously the recommendation for fuel doesn't actually refer to the design.
It is, it isn't. Sorry.
It isn't, yeah. It's difficult for me because with those houses next door to this site have been built. I mean, they are closer to the listed building than this site is, and I don't see as great a harm from this site as those would have been. I mean, that's my hesitation for accepting and refusing.
Okay.
Chairman, it's, the listed building, it is part of this. I don't think that's the strongest point for that. And listed buildings have a statutory protection as opposed to conservation areas, and the setting, section 66. It's more about the transition from one conservation area through to the other ones, an urban one, and the others more about the rurality and the buildings around there. And it's that transition between a firm kind of urban area that you see to the transition up into the fields, which is open countryside, and it's that transition that was the crux of the appeal before, to be honest, and it is the crux of that now. It's not been about design, quite happy with the design, it's just that you've got two conservation areas with different characteristics, but one's more of an urban one and one translates into countryside, and it's that transition that's, particularly when you're looking down from Manchester Road, you're looking into there, that there's, you start to creep up into that field, and it's that erosion of that setting that's the issue.
Okay. Anything else? No? Yeah, I've got that. Councillor Whitford first.
Thank you, Chairman. We did go, yourself, Jennifer and myself, we visited with the planning officer. I think other people have visited at other times. And Councillor Church uses Julian's Lane on a daily basis, and he's familiar with the site. I understand what the issues are in terms of why we've got a conservation area. We've actually got the countryside, and then we've got the urban area, and it is true that, you know, looking in or out, this development will have an impact on the scene. But I was a bit taken aback when I visited the site, because Andrew had said at the previous meeting that you wouldn't be able to see the listed building from the development, and when we went on site there's a large bund of earth, and you can see Hay Farm at the very top of it over this bund, but on the previous planning approval for the houses, that bund isn't there. So it's not the case that it won't impact on the setting of the listed building. I mean, in terms of the design, I'm assuming that the rear elevation is the one that looks out over the countryside, and to my mind that looked a bit chalet style. I am conflicted here, Chairman. I think there is a benefit, there is an economic benefit. The downside is that the very thing that people come to look at, as visitors, as tourists, is something that will be affected by development of this nature on the edge of the urban area, and it will affect the appearance of the town. Whether that's a strong enough reason to refuse or not, happy to hear others' views.
Councillor Goforth.
Yeah, my apologies because I couldn't visit the site on the timetable, but we have all of us been to that site several times over the number of years. I just wondered, and I think the design is what it is. I know this Barnoldswick Town Council object to this. What is the view of Barnoldswick Town Council? I mean, proximity to the conservation area and listed buildings. So they're the lead authority.
I think when it went to the planning committee, which I'm not part of, Mike, our former chairman, he didn't object to it. I have a lot of family history around Crowfoot Road, so personally, it's a bit of a grey area for me.
But I'm just going off what it said, Barnoldswick Town Council object, so there must have been a formal objection made, and I would imagine a vote in Barnoldswick Town Council at the time. I've not been a member of it.
Chairman, the planning consultations are delegated to a committee. Councillor Tom Whip might have been on that committee.
Yeah.
This application was submitted last August, and to be honest, I mean, you know, I won't say God created the earth in 10 days, but it's been a long time in coming to a decision as this one. And can you remember?
I cannot.
No. Neil will be looking it up on the planning board.
I just think I'd like to take. I was hoping to get some guidance from there. I mean, we've got a number of Barnoldswick Town councillors here tonight who should know what Barnoldswick Town Council think about it. I would have thought. So I'm trying to get some help here. That was all.
To be fair, it's a bit like David said. It's got its pluses and its minuses, and it's weighing up accordingly.
Yes, just to come in, I was on the site visit. Now, we went round and looked round, but we then decided to go down onto the road, Gillian's Road, to look from there. Now, it did have, if you to look and see what it, you know, in your own mind, what it would look like, you can see it's going to spoil the beauty of that area, because once you start with 3, how do you know it's not going to go further down into that field? Now, that, I was brought up around that area in Gillian's, and I
used to live on Gillian's as well.
So, you know, it's an area of outstanding beauty, and I do feel, looking at where they're positioned, and also you've got the listed buildings, we don't want them spoiling as well. You want to be able to see them. I mean, Barnoldswick, you know, it's going overrun with their houses as it is, and I'm like this at the moment. You're sort of on the coast. Do we? Don't we? But then when you look from the roadside, from Gillian's, and you sort of have a visual of what it would look like, it would spoil it for the rest of the cottages around that area.
Okay, so what do we want to do with this? Sorry, Councillor Church.
Sorry, just to add, I do take all the points there. I live at Gillian's. There is visible from any point in and around that area at least one new home, new residence, dwelling. And I wouldn't say we'll get used to it in time, but it has changed progressively over time. I don't see any point to objecting to, I wouldn't say a small change, I don't want to belittle it like that, but to a progressive change. We're not going to get the thing looking like an 18th century farm area as it was when these houses were built. I'm inclined to think, from what I've seen coming to this town as an outsider, seeing our tourism potential compared with what our neighbour Skipton is already getting. I know there are, well, we all know, we've all said there are things for and against, but I'm sort of leaning for.
Okay. So you're enough Cumden.
Sorry?
You're enough Cumden.
A mere 22 years, I have to say.
Oh, well, you're not enough Cumden then.
40 years.
Mr Watson, you want to come in?
Chair, just to confirm that it was the 7th of October, the Town Council from Joanne Geldard, if I've got that, Geldard, is it? And it's exactly what's printed in the report.
Right, okay. Councillor Tom, you want to come back in?
Thanks, Chair. So, I mean, I'm still in two minds, just because of the heritage, the conservation area. It's the transition from the rural to the countryside. And Neil, is there something that the layout could change to make that transition the same, just moved? Is it more because the site layout as it is, it makes it more gradual, it diminishes that overall transition?
I don't think, because you could landscape it to death in many ways, but then that openness and flow from an obvious urban edge into the countryside changes into a forest area. That changes the character of it in itself. So I don't think layout's going to make a significant difference. I think it's either stands or falls based on, you accept the benefits outweigh any harm in your judgment on harm, and that harm is in your view slight. That's the judgment you could come to if you so thought.
Okay. Right, well, we need to come to a decision. So, what does the committee want to do? Don't all speak at once.
I'm an off-coming as well, as it happens. 42 years of being off-coming. I think we've got to take a lead from the local councils, as we normally do, to understand what they wish to do on this. Right.
That meeting because my daughter will leave it.
So what do you want to do?
Well, Jennifer expressed it.
Jennifer?
I mean, it's like everybody. I mean, we're in a time warp. We don't want to be stuck in a time warp. We have to move forward with the times. I mean, I know the building that you're talking about, right in front of those your living Bridgillings. I was quite shocked to see that. Now, looking at this, yes, it's going to fetch. It might fetch some tourists, but it's going to fetch some financial benefit for some shopkeepers, maybe. And I'm sort of swayed to say yes, instead of refusing. But like I say, I'm an old barlicker like David. I'm stuck just yet.
Right, so you have a decision.
I'll propose that we say yes to this development, being an even-handed broker and trying to put the thing forward. There are two aspects to it. I remember well on that site several times talking through with Ken about the transitional part and the amount of time and effort that went into that to try and ensure that was safeguarded. I'll propose that we accept this development as a slight impact it appears to be having. So I would propose we
approve it.
We approve it.
Councillor,
and see what happens then.
Yes, Chair. I think I'd second that.
Right. Okay.
I think there's still some thinking of.
Yeah, we've got to make a decision. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? That's carried. Okay, thank you very much. The application to approve. Okay, we're going to move on now to 1 to 12.
Chair, can I just ask a question? Sorry, just before we leave planning, I meant to ask last week, and it's really a question for Mr. Watson actually.
I won't turn my back on you then.
No, it's not a technical thing, and it's nothing to do with this particular application, other than I remember coming to these meetings a while ago, and there was always used to be a little location map, much like the one that we put up on the screen, and I found that really helpful.
Yes.
Again, is there a reason why we haven't got one?
Yeah, I have no staff to do it. It takes ages to do it.
I've been asking this question myself, so you're not on your own.
Oh well.
So yeah, as soon as you can have the staff to do it, it will be done.
Provide it.
Well, Chairman, on that note, with reference to Councillor Church, when they was okay, can I compliment Joanne on the very good map that actually was included with the agenda there
for this place. Right, let's move on. Item 11, Amy Barlick Master Plan. We've got Ifcar.
It's all right.
Ifcar.
I was about to say, my name is Iftikhar Bakari. You can call me Ifti, but London not Shifty Ifti, so I'll try not to turn my back on anybody else. But,
this is for Nirvana's We Can Hear Your Master Plan.
Chairman, just to point out that there'll be more people listening and watching on YouTube than are in the meeting or in the room.
Right, okay.
So Tom will tell you if you're in a good position in terms of the view.
Okay.
You may be obscuring the view of the screen.
Right, I see. I'll take artistic direction from council. Am I okay here? Or? Right, okay.
Okay, that's correct.
Right. So, good evening. Thank you very much for...
Okay. Can we just have a bit of quiet, please?
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me. Like I was saying before, my name's a bit of a mouthful. It's Iftikhar Bakari, but you can call me Ifti, as long as it's not Shifty Ifti. And I've heard that all the derivatives of my name over the last 55 years. I can't even begin to imagine or begin to tell you. So basically, I'm here to do a short presentation on the proposed master planning process that's being undertaken by Pendle. Now, back in sort of June last year, the Policy and Resource Committee managed to secure some funding to help develop a master plan, and I thought it might be a good opportunity just to talk through colleagues as to what we're doing and how we're doing it and what the impact is going to be. And I've heard the conversation around the tables and you talking about a planning application that's coming in, and this would enhance that process, if you like. But I'll just walk through this and then hopefully it'll make a bit of sense. Oh, where do I have to point this?
Start working, I'll do it. This shit.
Are you going to be my glamorous assistant? Oh, okay. Okay, so basically I've just put out some context there. I'm sure you can read that for yourself. And it's just to sort of introduce and sort of set out what the aim of the presentation is and explain what a master plan is. And I don't sound to be patronising, but some people, some colleagues and maybe people on the internet don't really know what a master plan is, and explain some of the context behind that. And also look at funding sources that are actually supporting this, a bit of the consultant's brief, and an idea of indicative timelines as to how long this is going to take to sort of come to fruition by the time we have a document at the end of it, and some summary and conclusions and questions if anybody wants to ask any questions. So, on the next thing is that the aim of the basic presentation is to look at inform the steering groups that are set around this particular meeting for Bonalswick and Aby, but this is also being rolled out to Corn as well later on in the week. And it's basically to give colleagues an idea of how far we're getting forward in terms of regenerating the towns and enhancing the work that's already been taking place. And I know in Bonalswick and Aby, in Bonalswick you had the town centre, what was it called, the
Market Square.
The Market Square report that was done. And there's lots of things that are already taking place, and it's actually the job of the master planner to put all these documents together and put out a vision for the area. Okay. So what is a master plan? Essentially, there's lots of sort of theoretical and explanations from our planning colleagues and our town planning colleagues and architects and that sort of stuff. Essentially, what it means is looking at the town or the district in a holistic manner and to look at the different things that actually happen in that particular area that help a community evolve and make sure that the needs of that community is being met over a period of time. And it's not for the immediate thing as well, it's also about the future proofing of a community as well. So what we might say today is valid, maybe 20 years, 30 years from now, it might come out of date. And also, what's the interrelationship between different towns? You've got Aby, you've got Combe, you've got Bonalswick. How do these different conurbations work with each other? Do they work with each other? Do they not work with each other? Transportation links and bus routes, and you're talking about tourism and economy and all that sort of stuff. How do these things come together? So the idea is that a master planner or master planners are appointed to help facilitate for this process to take place. Now, we might be too close to the action, if you like, and we've got maybe emotive connections with the places that we live in, which is right and true and all that sort of stuff. But the thing is, the master planners will step away from that and allow for a very neutral type of perception of the area, and maybe draw out some conclusions that might not be visible to us because we're too close to the coalface. Yeah. So, my colleagues, just before I started, and I started in January this year, but I worked for Pendle Council about 10 years ago on developing the Whitefield area, and it got a lot of recognition and a lot of plaudits and bits and pieces. And so I've come back into Pendle Council to help develop this project here. And part of these things is that we need funding. Everything needs funding. It's the lubrication of getting these things done. And colleagues, before I started here, had worked very hard behind the scenes to get £70,000 to start off this process from the One Public Estate. And the criteria for getting that £70,000 is like looking at land that can be released for housing and delivering new homes. It's looking at new jobs creation and economic growth and what have you. Also looking at sort of integrated customer focused services, what can be enhanced already that's already there, what can be expanded. And also looking at maybe capital receipts that you can get in terms of sell off land or actually selling off buildings, and what sort of monies that can come into the system to allow this development to happen. So that was one of the criteria for one of the sources, and that's £70,000 there. And then on the back of that, there's also Lancashire County Council has put in this Lancashire Economic Recovery Growth Fund, which is about a bit of a mouthful, but LERG funding as we call it in the office. It's about £80,000 there. But in total, there's about £150,000 to help us with the master planning process. Now, that looks like a lot of money, but in real terms, it's not a great deal of money, considering it's spread across 3 towns. And there's a lot of issues to considering that. Neil, on the next one. And the point is that I've developed with colleagues a consultant's brief. And it took me a long time to sort of sit around and scratch my head and that sort of stuff to work out what priorities need to be determined to help these consultants that we're going to put into place and give them some kind of direction to start the process. But one thing, ladies and gentlemen, I want to point out is that we're not being prescriptive. We are not telling them that you must do this and you must do that. We are telling them that this is the general area, the geographic location. We're giving them some background information which colleagues have already pulled together with various reports and what have you. And then we're going to ask them to develop a process by which they can meet our sort of demands and also what we will think is the future of these towns and how they integrate with each other. And the idea was that I was going to do a little bit of an exercise. I'm not going to do an exercise, so just to if I had time, I would do that. But what I want colleagues to go away with is look at these 4 questions. And at some point, when we do appoint the master planners, we're going to ask them to come to colleagues and look at these main 4 areas. What are the strengths in the town? Which there is a natural strength in the town, of course there is. But also, what are the weaknesses? And there are weaknesses, and I'm sure if we can have a whole night debate about these types of things, look at what the opportunities are, and what are the challenges that are stopping those opportunities coming forward. That was one of the exercises. And the other exercises is look at 3 distinct areas. Can each one of these towns act independently in their own right, with their own identity, with their own culture, with all that sort of stuff, but then can they act as a district and act as a hub as well, which can fund each other, support each other? Can it be? These are the questions. And I broke it down further into economic, what sort of cross-fertilisation of economies can be done in terms of employment, businesses, manufacturing, what have you. Social networking, social elements where people can come in for shopping or some kind of tourism or what have you. What can actually play off each other? And then colleagues around the table have mentioned things like culture and heritage and that sort of stuff. And each town has its distinct areas, each town has its own distinct heritage and culture. How much of this can be either lumped together in one go or bring out the individual bits as well? Again, this is very theoretical, and I don't want anybody to walk away thinking this is being prescribed, and it's not being prescribed. But I'm, excuse me, I'm dealing with the appointment of these consultants, and I will be giving them clear direction. And I've been talking to colleagues around the table in some cases to sort of bounce these ideas off. Next slide. Okay, so I set out an indicative time, and when I spoke to Councillor Carroll, I think earlier on in May, I was setting out the sort of master planning brief at the time. And by end of July, I'm hoping that we have appointed master planners. At the moment, as of this afternoon, we've got 54 expressions of interest from master plans, which is quite a good number. So I'm hoping that we will get quite a good result out of this. So by the end of August, I'm hoping to have like a stage completed, by which time we've got a draft document that I can perhaps start presenting to people and colleagues around the table. By end of October, that should be even more fine. And by the end of November, that's submitted to Pendle Borough Council's committee for approval. But what does that mean in the end? Sorry. What does that mean? At the end of the day, we've got a working document, and that's what it is. That's what we need to do, a working document. And the idea of the working document, that it makes sure that we've got the views of all the people around the table, communities, agencies like County Council, we talked about the police earlier on, perhaps private developers that might be wanting to sort of look at these things, what sort of land we've got available already in the market, and what can be put together to deliver this thing. And it gives us a pattern, if you like. But the beauty of these type of things is that once this is done, and it's a very good comprehensive master plan, it's considered all the issues about culture, about heritage, about land, about constraints, that sort of stuff. It gives us a roadmap, if you like, that says if there is funding that's maybe over the horizon, we'd like to sort of say, we've already got a well-drafted master plan. This is how these towns are going to work together. This is how much we need. We've got it somewhat costed up, and hopefully we're first out of the traps to get this funding and start developing these type of things. Not just meeting the sort of the town needs, but looking at the more detailed things about the social needs, about the future proofing, about the heritage, about the culture, about the economy, and that's the idea. That's my details there, and I'm more than happy to take any questions. Sorry, I hope I haven't got my back to the camera. Is that fine?
Councillor Wick has a question.
Yes, I have. Can I just be clear about the funding? Ify, you mentioned the initial 70k, and then you said there was £80,000 through Lancashire County Council's LERG. I don't know what that acronym was for. So there's 150,000 to pay consultants to come up with a master plan.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You in the presentation there was reference to 12.8 million.
Yes,
and that's the share between Thorn, Baltic and AB?
No, that's the Lancashire County Council's overarching LERG funding, of which we're taking £80,000 off. So that's the total funding that they have for the to counteract the impact of the COVID and the economic decline and that sort of stuff. And we've got a small chunk of that to help us develop our master plan.
So the 80,000 is coming out of that 12.8 million. Can you unpack this district hub concept? Because I'm struggling to get my head around that.
Okay, the idea is that each area has got its own distinct recognition, or its own distinct area and what have you, in terms of the community that lives there, the people that work there, the people that come in and out, this and the other. But the point is that are these communities completely isolated and not dependent on maybe AB, depending on Barnoldswick, or Barnoldswick depending on Colne, or Colne depending on... And can these communities or these areas, which are distinct in their own right, maybe work together through connectivity and what have you, to make sure that the whole, or as a district, can work together better and cross-fertilise some of the challenges that they have. So in terms of housing, in terms of economic development, is it some, and these are just concepts at this moment in time. This is not prescriptive. This is just a question that's been asked at the master planning stage, whether is there links between these towns that can make them work better together.
Okay, so the concept is that there is sort of like joint working between Colne and West Craven. That's Balmoral and Abbey. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, joint working in terms of can the communities, I mean, for example, if people go shopping, will they go shopping to Colne as opposed to maybe go to Skipton from Abbey? It's some questions that might need to be asked. Is this something that could be brought in terms of the economy and the way that the communities integrate with each other? Has anybody mapped that out?
Okay.
So this is just an idea, just to sort of say, well, can these communities work together and be stronger together as a district? Not in the political sense, but just in a social or economic or a cultural sense.
Okay. Could I ask about the school? Because you had quite a long list of, economic, social, etc., etc., etc. So, am I talking about two master plans? Is Barnard Canadian one master plan?
No.
Or is it calling a different master plan, or is it all one document?
Each one will have its own sub-master plan, if you like, so with detail on it, and then seeing if these things can actually work together as well. So, Colne will have its own master plan, AB will have its own master plan, and Barnard will have its own master plan, and seeing if there's any overlaps between these master plans that will help bring that together. Now, the answer to that might be no. We see them in isolated communities, or yes, see them individually, and also see if they can actually work together as well.
Okay. So, the first question there was about the scope. You answered my second question. So, what is the scope? Is it the universe and everything?
No, it's not that big. The scope is purely narrowed down to three main conurbations.
But within that, we're talking about the built urban environment. Yes. We're talking about transportation. We're talking about links.
Absolutely, yes.
So I mean,
heritage, culture.
As far as those communities are concerned, those townships are concerned, it is the life, the universe, and everything. Yeah. Okay. I've got some comments, Chairman.
Well, can we just do
any more questions?
Paul, you've got questions.
Yeah, a couple of questions. What would be what's the status of this thing once it's been created and developed? Where does it sit in the sort of framework of documents that have say planners? I mean, I ask because in Kelbrook and South we're coming to the very final parts of our neighbourhood plan, and that will have a very clear status and a place within the planning process and other things. And obviously planning is its focus, but it does cover a lot of other things as well, such as a lot of the things you've talked about, and it references a lot of the history of our community and the environment. So where does a master plan sit in that framework of status? What does it inform, and what has to be referred to it in order for developments, be they planning or any other type of thing, and the part of that is who owns it? Who does it belong to at the end? The neighbourhood plan for us belongs to us as our community, but it sits within the planning framework. But so, what's its status? What does it mean, and who owns it at the end of the day?
Okay. Well, the ownership part of it will be owned by Pendle Council in terms of that's the master plan for these particular areas. The reports that you're talking about are the neighbourhood plan and what have you, that will be integrated into the master plan for that particular document, for that particular town, that will take that into account. Now, the idea is that if funding in the future is made available, that document perhaps might sit on the shelf for a time, will be brought out to sort of demonstrate that if funding is available, that we already have a master plan that identifies certain areas with their development and what have you, instead of starting from scratch and saying that we've got something, for want of a better phrase, but a shovel-ready scheme that can actually tap into some of those resources. And when these resources come in, part of the conditioning of these resources is, do you have a master plan, and do you have a sort of a vague idea of which way you want to go with that particular development or with that particular area, or whatever cultural or social or housing needs that there might be. We'd like to sort of say, yes, we have. this is a starting point, and from there you start developing the argument to sort of get the resources into that particular area.
Chair, if I may add just a little bit to that. When you look at funding opportunities, what's tended to happen over the last few years particularly, come very quickly at councils and organisations, and you get a very different time to prepare those. And you need to articulate what you as a community, because I don't know if you said Pendle will own it, but we hope that the community will own it. That's the idea behind it, although we will organise that. So you want, if you have opportunities in those communities that you want to bring forward, if you've got a document there and it's a bit more than just general aspiration, you will have to fund look at the costing, etc. You will have opportunities then to match the aspirations with potential funding. I'm part of the Lancashire Economic Development Officers group, and they put together a list of projects, and there's huge amounts, and we're conscious that some of our towns don't have those ready-made documents that if an opportunity comes along, levelling up fund, for example, for about 4 master plans, would we have been able to put a different bid together? And that's some of the synergies I think that Ifty was talking about. So they may not do anything immediately, if you're absolutely honest with it, but it may lead into things going forward. That's I think is important. But in terms of hierarchy, development plan's got the lawful hierarchy, but master plans play into that and vice versa.
Okay, thank you. And the other one I just have to ask, obviously, as a representative of one of the non-towns, how would this, I mean, we don't know until we get there, obviously, but obviously the impact that it would have on sort of the satellite communities, Kelrock, Salterford, Folge even, if there's going to be this focus on there, and bearing in mind we have already got now a neighbourhood plan, there's just going out to final consultation. What we don't want now is it to be overridden by something that's going to be developed by the urban communities. And we would just want to make sure that there's a synergy not only between the towns, but actually the other communities have a part to play in this as well.
Through the chair, I think that's a very good point that you make, because it's been raised by other colleagues as well. And the idea is not to usurp the work that's already been done, but actually enhance the work that's already been done and then put it into a bigger scheme, if you like, to make sure that actually is pulled out. And I think that's a very good point that you put forward. This is not about pushing everything, all the work that's been already taken. No, it's to actually take that in and put it into some kind of framework that sort of says the neighbourhood planning to be done for area A, that needs to be considered. These are the main salient points that have come out of that, and that needs to be considered as part of the master planning process. So you're right, that needs to be taken into account, and it will be taken into account.
Okay, Councillor Tomlin.
Thanks, Chair. If it helped councillors, I mean, I'm just sort of thinking of my understanding of it. When we first looked at redoing the town square in Barnoldswick, that was sort of spurred on by the Heritage High Street funding, which was sort of looked on as we had no time. And I remember Councillor Whip writing up close to the deadline on a submission for that. And it's difficult to think that maybe if we had the master plan then, we would have had more surer, sounder, shovel-ready plan to do something like that. We might have got the funding. Instead, Burnley and Skipton got it, I believe, so sort of either side of us. So I think for that kind of thing, and especially AB would love to see something like that. If they could have applied for the Heritage High Street as well, that would have been amazing. This sort of thing could act very well in that regard. I think that's its place for me, really. Yeah, so I mean, my question is in regards to links. We come back to scope again. If West Craven comes back and says, look, the most important thing for us is rail connection, would that have any sway on any plans with the East Skipton rail? Does it have more weight in government? Does having the master plan help in that regard for inviting bigger schemes into the area? which we don't see currently.
Yeah, I mean, I think with these type of things, I'd like to say yes, but it's not. Okay, that falls outside the realms of the master plan. If the master plan's identified that and saying that is a priority to help the economic regeneration of this particular area, that you need to have better connection and transportation links, and one of them being the railway, then at least it makes the argument that when funding is made available, that you can sort of say, well, this area needs it, this is a high priority, it's being identified through the master plan in consultation with the community, and then it allows for that strength to be put in to make that argument. Now, I can't, because other people will be applying for the same funding and they would also have master plans, but at least we're in a position to make that argument, which has been well thought out and well rehearsed, before sort of having a knee-jerk reaction and saying, yes, we want it, but what's your evidence supporting that? I think that's yes, it does lend itself to that, but I shy away from saying it will definitely guarantee a rail link, because I couldn't possibly say that.
No, I'm sorry, I can't fetch you. No, sorry.
Members of the public can speak on an agenda item. They don't have to give any notice.
Well, could I just speak about this?
No, just hang on a minute, Harry. Got Councillor Goldthorpe.
All right, well, I won't bother, but it's just making my blood boil. I'm 3 generations of business people in Balnoz. You've come into Barwick to tell us about the master plan. Why don't you open a shop, a shoe shop, a clothing shop? You don't realise everybody's shopping online.
Harry, this is not about this.
That's not about it.
Well, there's no difference.
We can't open shoe shops and whatever. We can help businesses.
Well, we know. We've got the square to open.
Yeah.
Big enough to help, are we?
Councillor Goldthorpe.
Who's going to pay?
Yeah, I mean,
I won't keep quiet.
you're right, Terry. I mean, just for instance, we've got £3.6 million of the funding available, but we have to, it's allocated to us, and I would certainly like to see it spent in the towns and villages who up to now haven't had a lot of money spent on it. But we have to have that in by the 1st of August. And something like this, where we've got work done, would allow us to put in a bit. We've got the money, we've got to justify how we spend it. And something like this allows us to do that off the shelf, if you will. And without doubt, the other parts of Pendle have benefited from this sort of activity in the past, to have something clear and precise. It is clear to me that unless we do something like this, then the small towns and villages, if you want, that make up the West Craven area and other areas, Blackhall and around there, and Cowbrook and so on. Although we have some strong, great industrial high-tech businesses in that part of the world, without this, oven-ready type of thing, we're scrambling to get an effective strategic package to meet the requirements of funding that's available even now. And for me, it's the strategic direction that you go with, and how we can do it, and whether it can be done. And to answer, if I may, Harry's point, it will and could mean new retail businesses being developed and interactions between where people shop and travel. So for me, it's the only way we're going to get our fair share for the small towns and villages that up to now haven't had a lot of money from anywhere. So full marks for where we're going, and hopefully we'll get there quick enough to grab some more money that's available from the government when and if it's there.
Okay. Any more questions?
I've got one more question that I want to come in with the comments. 50, you referred to capital receipts from the sale of land. What sort of land are you talking about?
There may be land that's worthwhile developing, where developers might be interested in maybe purchasing that land and then developing on that land, which means that there's a capital receipt that comes into the local authority that can be used for maybe putting funding into another pot. So this is part of the, I can't remember off the top of my head on the slide, but that's part of the criteria of funding that is being given through the LERD funding to meet some of these these things. So if there is land for development, for example, or buildings that are sort of maybe redundant and old and not being used, there might be an opportunity, depending on what sort of ownership they have, and if it's in the gift of, say, Pendle Council or the Town Council, that they can sell that particular building and bring the capital receipt back in for development, then that's an option.
I understand it's part of the requirements of the one public estate pot, so that's what I think.
Would that include the brownfield sites?
It could,
Yeah.
yes, it could, yeah.
That's good.
But it certainly won't include greenfield sites.
No.
Without World War III.
Well, no, it very clearly does.
No.
Neil has just said, and he's nodding at me, it's a condition of the one public estate that local authority land is identified for development.
No, it's saying if there are opportunities that are available in the master plan, it's up to you and the communities to say what is there. It's not saying you must sell your land, but it's part of the requirement to say you maximise, as you would expect it to do, to be honest with you, maximise your returns, as any business or community would, if that opportunity is right. It's not saying you have to do the wrong thing, it's saying if there are opportunities, then that's part of your assessments.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Chairman? Yeah. I just picked a few phrases out of the presentation. This master plan is a builder of consensus, and my thoughts about that are linked with this collective hub that was referred to as well, and it's also referred to as a district hub, and Colne and West Craven, being considered as a whole. And I cast my mind back not many months to when the draft master plan came, draft local plan came to Pendle Council Policy Resources Committee. And in that draft local plan, 50% of the new housing was identified as being, over 50% was identified as being in West Craven. And the M65 urban corridor had relatively little new housing development. Now, colleagues across the table know full well that the controlling group on Pendle Council are dominated by councillors from Colne, and councillors from Colne have very clear ideas about there being no development in certain areas of Cornwall. And I'm just putting two and two together now and thinking, well, this master plan, which covers Colne and West Craven, will end up with a Colne domination because it's bigger, and the Colne people will be saying, well, all the housing can go into West Craven. And obviously, West Craven is an attractive place because we have been very busy over decades making it an attractive place and actually having a strategy about promoting our town centres. And if you look at our town centre, and Neil will confirm this, in Barnoldswick we've got a very vibrant town centre with little family-run businesses, independent businesses. In Earby, not quite as strong, but a lot stronger than it ever was. I mean, I remember when Victoria Road half the frontages were just blank or boarded up, and that proportion has dropped enormously. So we've been very busy and very effective in retaining those occupied properties, and our vacancy rate, because of our independent businesses and the local connection there, our vacancy rate is a fraction of what it is in other townships. And you go somewhere else, and I am staggered and stunned, and you walk round and every other shop is boarded up. And we do not have that in Barnsley and Abbey. To be fair, we don't have that in Colne either. So I am concerned that we could end up here with calling the shots, and we end up with housing being dumped. And if they said, and I quote, releasing land for housing, this is called for wide-scale development. It talks about capital receipts, which I mentioned, and then there was a quote, perhaps private developers will be interested. Well, yeah, they are interested. We know they're interested. We keep turning down the planning applications, and some of them they get on appeal. And then, we're talking about, we've got a few trite phrases, didn't we? Shovel-ready schemes, oven-ready schemes, and an effective strategic package. And the document may sit on a shelf. Well, I know two documents, master plans. There was the South Valley Master Plan, which some of my colleagues worked very hard over a long number of years to effect, which was all about having housing development in brownfield areas. Well, unfortunately, none of that was ever implemented. That may or may not have sat on the shelf, but it was neither use nor ornament, because it didn't stop the owners of said property from demolishing it. There wasn't the redevelopment of the mills into residential development, and now it's not the interest of this area committee, but there's a massive plan application from Gleeson's for a development up Lenches, open countryside, massive block landscape, disaster. South Valley Master Plan, well, no use whatsoever. Briarfield Master Plan, whenever we talk about master plans, Briarfield representatives turn around and say, well, we had a master plan done X number of years ago, and we've seen nothing from it. My response to that is, well, we have had Northlight, Briarfield Mill, but that really was an adjunct to the master plan. It wasn't part of the master planning thing. And I don't know, there was a scheme there to repave Bridge Street, and I don't think it's ever been carried out. Has it been done now?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not making a point, but that came about because of that master plan.
Yeah, has it actually happened now?
It has, yes.
Oh wow, it took years to get that. And here in West Craven, they asked the County Council for a few tens of £1,000s to repave Victoria Road in Abbey, and they turned around and said, well, it's not a priority, sorry, there's no funding for it. We've rephrased that request to look at it as an economic development thing, which I would hope would be successful. And probably all this gobbledygook of master plans may help in accessing that sort of funding. But quite frankly, the more I learn about this, the more horrified I get. And I'm beginning to despair, really.
Chairman.
We need to get a grip on this.
So from that, I presume that you are against this?
I'm not against, but I am just... I asked about the scope, which seemed to be life, the universe and everything, when Councillor Tomley asked about, well, does that include Colne to Skipton rail route, which actually, if there was a rail route, that fundamentally affects the nature of this area. fundamentally affects it.
Yeah.
Well, it does, because if you have a rail route, there is much more propensity for our communities to become dormitory towns. At the moment, there are a high proportion of manufacturing industry. We do have travel to work in and out, and we've got loads of information on that. But rail station, that changes the game. We're in a different ball game altogether.
Get your gist. Go thought.
Just to allay a few fears at the minute, and I'll make this statement. I have gone down and said at numerous meetings that we need to ensure that we get money from whatever source into the villages and towns that have been neglected. I will not tolerate, personally, a concentric drive. That's been said by me, and I'll stick to that now. So it's as simple as that. In terms of the railway, I totally agree. But we're talking about £800 million and £800 million for a road link, because you can't do the two together. Yes, it should be there. But we realistically know that it's not going to come out of this. What comes out of this is the starting point to allow us to get our hands on money that is being offered up from the government, and we have to have a criteria to do it. Now, I have no fear that we will ensure that West Craven gets its fair share. This will not be dominated by Com in any way, shape or form. I take David's point, and Jenny will confirm that I will not tolerate that in any way. It has got to be looked at for West Craven. We've got all these good things in West Craven, aerospace, across Hope Technology, Van Olswick, across Earby, we've got the smaller communities. We've got to try and bring that together. We've got to have the ability to get us hands on the money, otherwise it won't come to us. But I certainly will not allow Com to dominate the master plan. They were late coming to it, to be fair. Originally, there were only two master plans there in terms of what we got, and Com wanted one as well. But they will not dominate it. I accept what you're saying, but I, for one, will not allow that to happen. I'll do my utmost to ensure it doesn't.
Mike may be able to help me here, because I recollect the decision which I was able to influence the thinking behind it, to have a master plan, Van Olswick and Earby. You say Colin came late to it. Where was that decision taken?
They came into the master plan requirement. They asked to be included.
Look, when did Pendle Policy and Process Committee agree to that?
It came in 6 months ago, a bit longer.
I can't remember. We can find out.
Yeah, but it did come in after the original direction, David, was to say, look, we need some form of plan to cover West Craven, because we haven't got in that respect. And when this money's come along, we've got to be able to get our fair share of it against what's being offered.
Chairman, I was, between Dean Lampton, myself and others, that was the initial push to have something that we could use as evidence to support funding bids.
Yeah.
But that was orientated by Olswick and Earby. So I'm just curious about the content, because they seem to be pushing in.
But I understand your fears.
Yeah. Can I ask about, we've got this steering group, which I understand Councillor Tom Whip's on. Amanda, are you on it? No. Who around this room is on that steering group? Because I thought we'd appointed people from this area committee onto the steering group, and then we appointed, or we requested town councils to put appointees on.
I can't remember that.
I think it's a matter of public record.
Yeah, probably haven't got there yet, David.
Yeah, probably haven't got there.
That particular.
But that will come back to us, won't it?
It will come back.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
sorry, Chair.
Master plans aren't local plans. They're not allocating. They're not saying Boyne Alswick or West Craven will have 110,000 houses. They're not about. They're on about looking at generally constrained, relatively constrained areas, and looking for opportunities in there that the town needs to have to grow. So, for example, Nelson Master Plan, a lot of little projects, all of which came off, but that in the town centre, we're not looking towards, let's see, magnificent field seats. It's not going to say we're allocating 4,000 houses on the site. It cannot do that. Anyone can't legally do that. It's meant to be a process of saying, actually, what do you as a community want for certain areas of your towns?
Yeah.
It's not going into the hinterlands, but you know the synergies. It's not going to. I'll disagree slightly with it. It ain't going to produce a railway, and it ain't going to produce. It's just not in that scale. But it might say the canals can have links.
I think for tonight we need to draw this to a close.
Well, why do you want to draw it to a close? I mean, this possibly.
It's going to come back again and again to it.
Yeah, it's going to come back again and again at later stages.
Yeah.
Now, I think that this needs to be something that's done from the ground up rather than sort of determined top down. We've already heard that one public estate have got conditions about their funding, about generating capital receipts, about releasing land for housing. These are all ways in which talking about building consensus. Red rag to a bull. These are all trigger words that people in West Craven will rear up and say, well, hang on, we're not having this, we're not having that, and we're not having the other. I understand that there is a great deal of benefit from looking at the way that the townships are and what improvements we could make. So in Erie, at the last committee meeting, we had a bit of discussion about trying to create some public space in the town centre that could be used for events and activities in order to develop footfall and things like that. So that's all to the good. But I think this is getting off on the wrong foot, and unless we actually see people sort of involved with this, I mean, I'm not aware, has the David Town Council discussed it? Has Barnoldswick Town Council discussed it?
Well, let me just clarify this. If can't, what is the next procedure in this? What's going to happen next?
Okay, the next procedure is that by mid-July we would have appointed master planners. We've gone through a procurement process, and we're going through a procurement process. The master planners will come out to each one of the towns, do public consultation, take views from the councillors, the steering committee, the Lancashire Town Council, all the agencies that might be involved in this process, as well as the voluntary sector, small businesses in the area that are operating, come together and identify, a bit like what the points that I've put out there, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the challenges, and come out with addressing those things that the community would have raised. They're the experts in their particular area. The master planners will gather this information, take on the reports that are already out there in terms of the neighbourhood plans and what have you, integrate that into the and come out with some distinct areas and priorities that will be required, set out by the community.
Right.
And try to address those issues.
So it is going to go out to consultation. Everyone's going to be consulted. Residents, businesses, town and parish councils.
But what are people going to be consulted on?
What they would like to see in their town.
An open consultation. What would you like to see in your town? I'm sorry, I think Harry and I are on the same wavelength.
Yeah. What you need is a magic wand.
Well,
It won't work.
we're just going to have to wait and see.
Through the chair, I suppose I want to put the point that this is not a prescriptive process. This is a consultation process, and what the findings after the consultation will be presented back to the community to say, well, this is what the community requires or is wanting. The master planners don't dictate, it's the community that dictates
But
to the master
Chairman,
plan.
this hasn't even been discussed by the respective town and parish councils indeed.
Well, the report went to the Policy and Resources Committee on the 24th of June last year.
Yeah, 12 months ago.
Yeah. But then in the interim period, the funding has been put together. And this is part of the consultation process. This is the point of coming out to the members and saying that this is what's happening because the green light has been given back a year ago.
So we've got 150,000 to pay consultants.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Councillor Tomwick, last question.
Yes, thanks. So the capital receipts, you're saying it's a requirement. I think people's ears are sort of flaring up there. What specifically is the requirement? Is the requirement that such a master plan finds the maximum amount of capital receipt?
No.
Yes,
No.
I thought so.
No.
So is it more a case of if there is opportunity, it says it's there and identifies it?
Yeah.
And it's not the case that it then says to Pendle, you've got to do that.
No.
Yeah.
It's not. The point is, under the OPE funding, there are some criteria for getting that £70,000 in the first place. And one of them is at least look at what area you have in terms of what capital receipts you can possibly generate for the betterment and development of the community. And I think that's a fair question when you're trying to develop the community and address some of the challenges with limited resources.
So it's more requiring the requiring the local authority to be open about the concept rather than actually saying you have to do this.
Yes,
Yeah.
completely. It's an option.
Right.
And if there's no capital receipts to be generated, then that's
It's
not
an
an option.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll draw that to a close for now. And thank you very much for coming in.
No problem.
Tim, can we formally resolve to request that this process is reported to the respective town and parish councils as a matter of urgency?
Yeah. You can do that.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No
Carl.
problem at all.
Okay. All right, I'll go back to the agenda now. Item 6. Yes,
Okay.
yes, please. You can stay if you want.
As much as I want to.
You go home. Okay. Item 6B, appeals. Anybody got anything pressing on this one? Just note it.
no.
Yep. Item 7, enforcement action. Anybody got anything on this?
Yeah, yes, Chairman. The first one, the former Gospel Hall on Collins Road. Just this week, the fence fell down. Is the owner going to deal with this, or is it going to land in Pendle Council court?
I don't know about that. We will have to go and see it. But I have done a statement for the notice, so we will start on that.
Mr Walker may have some information about the fence. No, well, I understood that your service area was dealing with it.
It's news to me, I can find out, Chair.
Okay. I don't expect Mr Walker to know everything that's going on, but, you know.
Okay, anything else? No? Alright, moving on. Item 8, capital programme, just note it. Item 9, Chapman Court Verge. I believe prices have now come in ranging from 342876 to 3880.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just come in, I was out on a site visit with Councillor Lee, and I did ask, can I please finish talking? Shut that door, as they say. But
We need to go outside.
I've gone asking to go outside. We had a look at the pavement, what they wanted to do, and I said, and David asked me if I'd ask LCC if they would contribute. I spoke to Councillor Edwards and said, can we have some funding from there? I'm awaiting a reply back from him. I will probably see him on Thursday and ask him what he's doing, whether we get half of it or all of it. I mean, it's only just over £3,000. I'm sure they can find that in LCC. So at the moment, I will get back.
So we're still waiting. Yeah, Councillor, wait.
Just as a general comment, I mean, the county council spends millions upon millions of pounds every year on car transportation, the roads. And I think, you know, to refuse money for some pedestrian traffic is unacceptable, really. And we need to see the same investment for that kind of active transportation. We're in a climate emergency. We don't want to see people being forced onto the road in front of cars, safety there, everything. I think for LCC to turn around and say no, we won't make improvements to pedestrian routes is unacceptable, really.
I will definitely sort this out for you.
Okay.
Come what may. As I
Alright.
say.
Okie dokie. Do you want to come in, Councillor?
No, I
Right.
tend to cover the ground.
Alright then, moving on, item 10, traffic liaison meeting, Councillor Pascal.
Yeah, I noted when the council met in March, we had the we had the notes of the 23rd of February meeting presented, and on there was something I just raised because I didn't quite understand it. There was Cone Road, Kelbrook, no objections received following the consultation. It is now to proceed to formal TRO. I think anybody was completely clear what it was, but I think we all got down to what we thought it was at the end of Church Lane. There was a problem. There's a long-standing problem with visibility coming out of there, and that was going to go to a TRO. I guess I've got a concern, but that hasn't appeared in the minutes that we've got for this meeting, and I just wonder if that's an oversight, whether it just seems to have disappeared. And I just wonder whether or not we can follow it up. What's happening with that TRO that was presented back in the February minutes? And how come it isn't in this one, and is there a process?
We shall find out for you and let you know. Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. On the second page, of the table, there's Victoria Road, Ely, duration of driving, gable of 7 Victoria Road. And this is where we've got the new flood wall. And apparently when this was first designed, the county council were requesting a restraining barrier so that somebody couldn't drive up it at speed and punch through the wall and go into the bed. Now, I mean, frankly, my view is that was completely OTT. My understanding is that our engineers, our council's engineers, have managed to get some sense, and that this restraining barrier is no longer a requirement. So the width of the road, it's a gable end between the Boot Street, Albert Road, car park area, and Victoria Road. It would be perfectly adequate to maintain the one-way traffic that we currently have. So could we resolve, Chair, to request that this prohibition of driving order is not proceeded with, and that the one-way track driving, which we had previously, is reinstated when the work is completed.
Yep. Councillor Goswell.
That is quite right, but there was some debate very early on before this all started whether, and it went to the town council as well, whether they wanted to do away with that access point in total and make it pedestrian only. And that was discussed in some detail at the time, but it's right way back at the beginning when we were applying to do the work. So whether that's got into it or not, I don't know.
Well,
there wasn't much appetite for that.
Well, at one point, the work was dependent on and in the end there was a temporary traffic regulation order put in place to allow the work to go ahead, but the absence of the prohibition of driving actually impeded the work being done. My second one, Chairman, is on, they're not numbered, it's paragraph 5.3, and it's either the top of Westgate or the bottom of Colne Road, and it says LCC has received reports of parked vehicles on Colne and Westgate which are preventing the free flow of traffic. Customers requested double yellow lines on one side to prevent double parking, and it's been agreed to progress to informal consultation for a short length of double yellow lines on the inside of the bend opposite numbers 1 to 9 Town Head. Now, Chairman, a bit of backstory on this one. We had extensive residents' meetings donkeys years ago to try and ameliorate the parking problems in that area. Some talk of which led to nothing. In the meantime, there's more and more cars, and the problem has got more and more acute. I suspect that this could be quite contentious, and I wonder if the County Council would be willing to have more of an open consultation on what could possibly be done in order to make the situation better. I just think that in terms of a proposal to put double yellow lines down without in some way ameliorating the parking position is just going to lead to neighbour, sort of fighting neighbour really.
Yeah, we can ask them.
So my proposal would be to ask Greenwich County Council to have an open consultation prior to going ahead with consulting about the double yellow lines.
Yeah, well, they're going to inform. What's the difference between informal and open?
No,
they're saying they're going to be an informal consultation as opposed to an open one. So you want to widen it up to what, all the residents in that area, or Colne Oswick?
Chairman, the difference between what the County Council are intending to do, they are saying they are going to have an informal consultation with I know not whom, because they don't inform or consult with people like the respective town council. We've seen that in here, we've seen that in Brunswick. They don't ask those people. We're at a bit of a loss as to who they actually consult with. I mean, who do they ask? We don't know. But they are going to have an informal consultation on their proposal to put double yellow lines on the bottom of Colne Road.
They're a bit on the website then, won't it?
No, it doesn't appear on any website, so there's nothing.
No,
but that's what they are proposing. My suggestion is that before having an informal consultation and putting double yellow lines down, that they actually have a consultation with residents, a discussion with residents to say, look, we've got this problem, how can we resolve it?
Yeah.
There may be suggestions, there may be some land that, could be generate a capital receipt to create a little parking area. I don't know, but to start with the double yellow lines as that's what we're going to do. When I think about it, it's completely different to saying this is a problem. What could be done about it?
Right, okay, we'll ask them what sort of consultation we want to know.
Well, that's not what I'm proposing, Chair.
To include town council and residents.
You are rephrasing.
Yeah,
You are rephrasing what I've
it's
said.
not it.
Well, I don't think you have.
No, I have. It's written it down, I can see it. Okay, Councillor Dominic.
Thanks, Chair. Maybe we could do these page by page next time. Dodging right back to Victoria Road, Earby, and I think Councillor Goulthorpe picked up on this somewhat. We've got it in our minds to be repaving Victoria Road. We've got the idea of creating community space there. And I think before we decide whether or not to reopen that section of road, we need to be thinking about what are our goals with the area. And if that's going to be a route to get to communal space from the shops and the frontage there, you want to make that as convenient, as nice as you can. And if the car park can continue to operate with the access that it currently has, do you need to open this road to have a one-way system as it used to? And back to what Mike said, I think we need to be thinking about the town council's comments. Do they want to see it reopened? How has it worked for the past however long this wall building has come to? And I do have another one after that, so I can see people indicating on this one. So if we can have the discussion on this one, I'll come back to the one I want to do after.
Yeah, Councillor Tom might be wanting to come back to the one at the foot of the page. I mean, the key thing for me is that this is the best route for the deployable pump to get from its base on the car park to the street that it's located in to protect properties. And if we can't use the road, that short section of road, and if you have prohibition of driving, you might put bollards in to physically prevent access.
Yes, no, we don't do that.
So going back to Albert Road though, those can be removable. And you can
not when it's a flood.
I did warn the committee the last meeting that had been radicalised with its civil engineering degree.
No, definitely not. You got another question?
Well, I can see other people want to come in about this particular one. So.
Well, it's kind of to another point, so I'll leave that. But
I'm going on to a different area entirely after this. So if
no, it's all right.
Go on.
So I will get on with it. Albert Road, Bonoldswick. Formal consultation completed. No objections received. There was an objection. We objected here. Town council objected. We rescinded those because we were promised that they would be looked at afterwards. The current situation on this sheet doesn't give reference to that, and I think my alarm bells are going off, thinking the people in charge in these traffic liaison committees aren't going to action what we want actioned.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
I mean, as it's written at the bottom of there, that is wrong. I mean, objections were received. We had a site meeting. Renzo was there, Tom was there, I was there, and Mike Whitney was there from the town council. What we hammered out was that we would acquiesce with these proposals going forward on the basis of two things. And the first thing was that the notice that says about the pedestrianised area would be located on the lamppost in front of the shops, and at the other end of the street the no entry sign would be located on the lamppost in front of the shops rather than on a freestanding post. On top of that, there was to be and I might not have any technical phraseology right here, but there was going to be a study done about the way in which, what was it, driving sometime ago, I can't remember, but I've got it all on emails. It was to do with the one-way system on Frank Street and the access for delivery vehicles going on to what is the pedestrianised area. And apparently Lancashire County Council, their position is that between 10 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there shall be no vehicles on the sets on Albert Road. Well, I can tell them quite honestly, I allowed a cortege through there this afternoon, actually opened it up to allow Dorothy Turner's funeral procession to pass. They were all reached at the pedestrian route. I reached at over 10 times because I was taking stuff away from vans on the square. Well, Lancashire County Council, if you want to prosecute me, here I am. The fact is, it is totally impractical for delivery vehicles not to be able to access that area on a daily basis. So the agreement was that there would be an immediate review of all those driving orders, and there is no reference to that in here whatsoever. It's just like it's been eradicated.
Can we find that out?
Chairman, there is a further issue in terms of the request that we made about putting the signs on the lampposts.
Yeah.
Because the lamppost at the back of the square fell down sometime last week, and the base of the column where it goes into the ground had completely corroded. There was nothing left. So Lancashire County Council will be very hesitant, and I think they'll be digging all the new pavements up
Did you know about that?
to inspect the...
No,
Yeah.
we don't know.
I've got some pictures on here, you don't want to see them.
You don't know.
I'll sort it out.
But fortunately, I mean, the column fell into a range of raised beds rather than onto the road or onto someone's head.
Somebody there, yeah.
Yeah. One thing we could think of, okay?
Catherine, you want to go?
That's great.
Oh, no, you're excellent.
Oh, right.
I just like to come.
Ignore me.
We won't ignore you. Okay, so that's it on item 10. Okay, done 11. Item 12, Northbourne Community Centre. Councillor, has the Town Council met now?
Yeah.
Made a decision.
They'd like to, they're definitely interested in taking it on, but they want to know all the costings, what state the building's in as well, and wouldn't mind going to have a look around the building as well and see what all the costs are going to be involved. But they are interested, and in your report, like maybe it becoming a community asset and things like that, because a lot of people locally are interested in using it, so we'd definitely like to go forward with that.
Okay, is that up to us to arrange that meeting, or is it up to the Town Council?
We picked up the ball following the previous agenda item.
We did, yeah.
And at the meeting I said that if the Town Council made a positive decision in terms of them taking on the building, subject to due diligence, which is the last phrase, which is the bit that Amanda referred to, that we would ask the Together Housing to community asset transfer the property to Ely Town Council. I think Ely Town Council, not need a helping hand really, but I think it would be sensible for Pendle Council to make its expertise available for Ely Town Council to take something on that's, we don't want to get a pig in a poke, do they?
Yeah, but before they take it, before we do it, we ask them to asset transfer it. They want to know the costings and the ins and outs first, before you make a final decision on whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, so Ely Town Council, as I understand it, have made a decision in principle that they would take the building on subject to the due diligence,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
you know, the costings and the repairs and that. The next bit of the jigsaw is getting together housing to agree to the community asset transfer. You know, we don't want community together housing saying, well, we'll transfer it and it's going to cost me £50,000.
Oh, absolutely not, no.
So the next bit is to get the housing association to agree to the transfer.
To the transfer, and if they agree to transfer it, then every town council need to know all the ins and outs.
Well, they'll need to do a survey of the building. And so we arranged a meeting with Together Housing previously. I'm not suggesting that we need another meeting, but if they come back with no, we're not going to do a community asset transfer, I think we need to reconvene that meeting and take the issue forward with the housing group.
Okay, so if we can ask Housing Pendle then if they are willing to community asset transfer this building to Ely Town Council. Okay, let's move on. Item 13, Wentcliffe Drive.
Chairman,
There has a desk study been done on all this. Have we any updates on this? No? No? Okay, Councillor.
Well, Chairman, I mean, it gets worse, doesn't it, really?
Yep.
The desk study sort of indicated that further studies need to be carried out. The water is still flowing. People's houses are a quagmire, and I mean, I had a message on today from someone who lives on Wentcliffe Drive and is affected by the water, but the next door garden is even worse. And as we saw on the site visit, even during a dry period, the water is welling up and it's just awful. So the further measures that we discussed on site were twofold. Firstly, in respect of the county council and their agreement to allow collect water that's been collected to discharge into the roadside gullies, and I'm not sure that we've got that agreement. No. So,
well, my information is the last time I discussed this with Scott and Gareth, that they would be applying to do that. In fact, if I remember rightly, David, you reminded them that they would need permission to do it. And I think that is with them, as I understand it. Although they haven't done much on this area because they've been doing other things. But that has to take place. We've got some money to put to one side anyway to help some remedial work there out of the 20k that was allocated from policy and resource, which hasn't been spent, which could help in the very, very short term. And so really it's up to Scott to get that permission, because if we're going to put some form of system in there along that whole verge area right the way across it to the bottom end to help, and then they need bridges if you want to cross it. Somewhere that water's got to be got rid of into the gully system. That takes care of one side. It doesn't alter the things that are happening on the other side. That's got to be with Scott Waller.
Well,
he has said to me, as Scott, that it is next on his list.
Yes. Chairman, what I'd like to see tonight is that we have a resolution that, you know, as a committee, we request Lancashire County Council to give agreement to discharge the water arising. We won't call it groundwater or surface water, any other sort of water. We'll just call it the water into the drains that they have, the gully pots. But as Mike says, that is not going to help the garden. It will help the water flowing onto the pavements or across the pavements and across the road, but it won't stop the problem in the gardens. Now, there is a suggestion that the contractors who put the boreholes in for the ground source heat pump were negligent, and I think that needs to be pursued. I think that's a question of legal action from Pendle Council on behalf of the residents, because I mean there's no, Pendle Council doesn't have a locus with this, but the residents are helpless, and you know, they're overwhelmed with the magnitude of the problem. So either we organise an action group and sort of get to the High Court or something like that.
That instruction was given. I must be clear on this. I've been on this for 2 blinking years. The instruction was given that at some stage we've got to, once we've got this done, if it identifies a particular route, that Pendle Borough brings them together. There's obviously a possible situation that it's down to Together Group and their work on it.
No, the report, the desktop study clearly identified that the contractors were negligent in not doing an evaluation of the geology of the area.
But it's not a legal requirement then.
Oh no, but if they there's guidance and guidance, there's guidance.
Yes.
In effect, it's law.
That instruction was given that they must, once they've got some evidence, they must then proceed to do exactly what David's suggested. Because the problem with the site is it's a mixture of private ownership and social housing. And that's been the back off. I've got to say that for some time, Pendle backed away from this because they didn't want to get themselves into a shadow ownership of the problem, if you want to put it that way, because it isn't their problem, other than the fact residents there are suffering. And so that instruction was clearly given, and I'll reiterate it again, but it was clearly given that once we've got to this point, they have to take it further. They've had certain meetings with Together Group who obviously deny any responsibility. But there was a lot of shadow boxing in the early stages of this because the fear of Pendle taking on the risk of it. And that was the slow part at the beginning. But you're right, I mean it is, we now know why it's happening. We believe there is a reason for it being made worse. The fact that this has been happening for a number of years, getting gradually worse and worse, and then you've got a possible breach of the aquifer. So yes, I mean, that is the next step. And both Scott Wardley and Rose Rouse are aware that that is the next step.
So, Chairman, can we have a resolution from this committee actually requesting that legal action is instigated in respect of the failure of the contractors to follow the guidance in respect of drilling boreholes, in the hope that we can pin the costs of actually fixing this problem on those contractors?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't think there's any argument there, David.
Well, let's agree.
I don't think we have to do it. We can do it from here, but the instruction's been given. But by all means...
I'm not sure where the instruction has been given.
Well, I gave the instruction at the time, David, that if we got to this position, we should take legal action.
But I'm sorry, we as a council, we have a system that doesn't give individual councillors...
I wasn't doing that as an individual councillor. I was doing it as a member of the leadership group and deputy leader. That's what I was doing it as.
But that has no...
Well, fine.
That has no constitutional status.
I think by all means we should instruct and support Pendle taking it further. Whether they're in a position to take legal action themselves on this.
Well,
We
It's a
need to...
look, Mike's saying, you know, it's not Pendle Council's problem. Well,
No, I
it
didn't
is.
I didn't say that.
Well,
let's stop. No, I didn't say that.
It's not Pendle Council's responsibility. We are not responsible for flooding in Eby per se, and yet for the last 10, 20 years, we have devoted enormous resources in order to try and alleviate the flooding problems in Eby. And we've currently got the flood wall and consequently the mill side being protected from flooding. And we are spending millions of pounds. Now, we have done that as a council because the residents and the business people need that work to be done. There's no, you know, Pendle Council doesn't have a duty, but we are able to do it. And here we are able to act on behalf of residents to try and alleviate another flooding problem. And, you know, you're saying, well, we don't want to take ownership of the problem. I mean, I think...
I didn't say that.
He didn't
Now,
say
look,
that.
let's
No,
just get...
I
sorry, Chairman,
well,
I just want to
it's
get...
a matter of record.
Listen.
You said Pendle Council...
No, it is not.
You said Pendle Council does not...
Councillor Witt, please be quiet.
Can I help?
Councillor Gothorpe.
Let him go ahead with what everything he's just said.
Right.
Let him do it. And we'll put it
I'm
through.
not going to do it. It's Pendle
No,
Council's
but you want this committee to do it. I'm quite happy to support
I'm
it.
saying we should
That's absolutely fine, David.
Yeah.
Absolutely fine.
You should have just said that in the first place.
Yeah.
No, because, look, I tried to explain. Where were you two 3 years ago when I was wading through it all, talking to residents and trying to solve the problem?
Yeah.
Well,
Now,
we were probably wading through water too.
Well, you was probably messing about with your gullies, whatever. But all I'm saying to you is that we have been on this very carefully, going through it. If you want this committee to make a resolution for Pendle Borough to take legal action, by all means do it.
Well,
So
you know, they've been dealing with it for 3 years,
so
and we've got no further forward.
Yeah, we have, but we've got a resolution on the table.
We've got 20 grand further forward.
Has that been
Councillor Witt.
seconded?
Well, I propose trying
yeah.
anyway.
I seconding that resolution.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. All those in favour?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a double resolution.
It's
It's
a
got
double.
the county council,
Yeah.
it's got the legal action.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Item 14, environmental blight. Anybody got any issues on this one? Yeah, Councillor.
Yes, Chairman. West Close Road, Lorry Park. Long strip there. We're going to get it resurfaced. I'm not clear where the aggregate in the corner has come from. I assume it's fly tipping. It doesn't appear to have been moved. And then I was down there over the weekend dropping some stuff off that the town council are moving from one place to another. And lo and behold, there's a load of timber decking appeared, which had been dumped on overnight between one day and the other. You know, the fly tipping is just continuing, and it really beggars belief just how people are dumping stuff there. So, you know, please, some effective action, you know, to check it on a weekly basis and make sure it's cleared off. And whether it's the county council's responsibility or Pendle council's responsibility, I don't know. But, you know, can we ensure that it's done?
So through you, Chair, the site, we know it's on the problem side, and officers do patrol and do deal with fly tipping offences. And we have spoken to the Household Waste Recycling site in the past about the installation of a camera, and we're moving closer with that now, so hopefully we'll have some positive outcomes from this in the future.
Okay, thanks, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is for David. Essex Street. It looks like a lawn at the moment outside all the houses there. Who is in charge of killing all the grass or whatever it is. I mean, if I lived on it, I would have
We talked about this before the meeting.
Is it weed spray?
Pardon? Weed spray. I hope it's safe, that weed spray.
Weed spray.
It'd be better if they just give them a thing and they can get it out better.
Okay.
Chairman,
Well, it's a mess. Coming into the town,
yeah.
it's a right side. It is untidy.
Chairman, we were laughing because before you arrived, we tackled Mr Walker and said, why haven't all the pavements been weed sprayed? Because by now they've been weed sprayed quite a long time since. There were 2 weed sprays a year, early in the season and later on, and that was quite effective in keeping the vegetation down. Because people might argue that it's attractive and encouraging wildlife. However, it's destroying the integrity of the pavements. So the routes are, and whether people think it looks a mess. And Mr Walker reported that there is only going to be 1 weed spray this year instead of 2 because of inadequate funding. And for you 2 guys over the road there, he said, my response to that was, well, it's the county council who pay Pendle to do this. Ask the county council for the funding to do 2 sprays. And Mr Walker said, well, we have asked them and they said no.
Did you say county councillor?
Sorry for you, Chair. I don't think I said no. I said there is a situation nationally, globally, with the supply of glyphosate for yeah. So the price for the product has gone through the roof, to be honest, and we've searched and tried to obtain the best price that we can to provide the service, and we've found the charges from whoever we go to for almost get the full weed spray that we're given from Lancashire County Council. But we've spoken to Lancashire County Council, made them aware of the issues, and they've asked for extra funding, as Councillor says. The County Council officers have said they will look at it. As of yet, they haven't come back and said no. Well, they have told us to get on with the 1 sprayer, which will get the full funding on. That spray is going to commence in probably the 20th of June, I'm informed this week.
Have they said when they might come back?
They haven't said.
So, could you let me know who you spoke to?
Yes,
I'll
of course.
work with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright. Okay then. Moving on. Item 15. Representatives on outside bodies. It's all from the Drainage Board. At the moment, there's myself and Councillor Mark Goldthorpe. Any other nominations for this? No? Move them on block then? Yeah. Okay.
Just,
Can you have it at all?
there's something else on this item. It's my understanding Pendle Council has a nomination for a trustee at Bancroft Mill. Should that really be nominated from this committee, with it being situated here?
I don't know.
Because I don't think it has been, and so really we should. I don't think it has to be a councillor either, but
No.
I just think being close to the issue and.
I really don't know on that one, to be honest.
It might be one just to bring back.
It makes sense, but it's never been on this list before, has it?
Well, with respect, there was I think it might have been a one-off decision, but the former councillor Ken Hartley.
He was on it, wasn't he?
He was a representative from Pendle Council.
Yeah.
And it may be that was it wasn't in the annual appointment thing, it was a one-off thing.
It's because they changed the constitution and they're now no longer a charity, they're a museum.
Right.
And so it was during that progress, which wasn't out of sync with our assigning body's annual meetings, that a one-off decision was made in separate to that, that Ken Hartley be the appointed person. So
Right, well, can we find out?
Yeah,
Can we find out where if it should come here or to full council? I don't know.
I would
No,
think it should come here.
No.
On the outside bodies list, one to you.
No.
Well, if we can find
it's an
out,
organisation.
and if it is, it can come back here next time, can't it?
Well, they'd probably want someone this year. Or do you mean next meeting?
Yeah.
And, Chairman, I mean, you could,
Can't do it now.
you know, pretend,
Preemptively.
put somebody down for it.
Madam Chairman, can we not do it now?
Yeah.
See
And
what
we'll do
we
it, yeah.
then if you
Faffing
ratify it
around.
afterwards,
Be ratified afterwards, we can do that. We've got a nomination.
And whether
nominate
Chris
Tom
Church...
Whip.
No, Councillor Tom Whip is a representative, is a trustee
Oh, you're
from
a trustee.
the Town Council.
Right.
I would ask if Councillor Chris Church would be interested and willing to do it.
Would you be willing to do that?
Didn't know it
don't look
was.
at it.
It's not a trick question.
We did say...
a neighbour of it.
We did say if you get on Pendle Council, you don't have to do everything else. So it
So,
is...
sorry, okay, can we let Councillor Church answer? Would you like to do it, Councillor Church?
I agree to do it.
Wonderful.
I'll second that.
Right, okay, all those in favour? Yep, that's carried.
There you are.
So,
Messing
it
about.
might just have to get ratified here next month, but you're on it.
You've had it now.
Okay, item 16, Cornwall Transfer. Cornwall, Open Space Cornwall Place. Oh God, I'm getting my words mixed up now. Cornmill Place. You got a bit of report in front of you. We can confirm that there was a Section 106 agreement to transfer the land from the developer to council, but this did not happen. The company is now being dissolved. The legal team are making enquiries with the practitioner that dealt with the liquidation to try to resolve this issue. So we are looking into it at the moment to see what can be done. As it goes into liquidation, we all know what happens with that. Yes, Councillor.
Well, I'm a bit confused here. As I understood the position, the land had been transferred.
No, it hasn't.
Well, and the developers had also handed over £20,000 for its upkeep. Now, I am aware that the £20,000 was there, and it's been used over the years to pay for what grass put in and etc. that there's been. And I did know the figures a few years ago. So I'm quite staggered that, they handed over £20,000 to look after some land that they didn't transfer. I'm just a bit,
Yeah. Do we know this is, does anyone even know if this is the case? Looking left and right here.
Well, the legal team are looking into it. They got all the documentation out and it appeared that the land hadn't been transferred, so that's why they need to do more digging around.
Can we find out if we were paid 20 grand?
I think we have received.
Yeah.
So is it-
It's not, sorry, Chair, it's not unusual to be paid and then the land transfer takes some time afterwards, but I don't know the full details of where the legal process is.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Well, so you got the money.
if the company's gone into liquidation,
You won't get any more.
no, if the company's gone into liquidation, then any of their assets will have become, I don't know, the Treasury solicitor will be the person that owns them. So, we can get the land back off the Treasury solicitor.
Well, the legal team are looking into it, see what can be done. So we're just going to have to wait and see on that one, I'm afraid. Okay, item 17, items for discussion. Anybody want to start this? Yes, Councillor Witt.
Yeah, so the A part of this discussion, read the LCC email. They don't seem very proactive like some other councils. So, I mean, without the buy-in, I don't really think we could do much with it. I don't know, I mean, what are your thoughts? Anyone else?
Anybody have any thoughts on it? Yeah, Councillor Goldberg.
I know one thing that the enforcement and we're going back in-house at county, one of their priorities, the number one priority at the moment from that point onwards was the issues around schools and drop-offs and stuff like that. So there is an enforcement there, and they're going to, obviously, they're not just doing it at haphazard, they're going to where they're being requested to do that sort of thing. And I think that's their policy at the moment. Whether it's feasible to close roads for a period of time. It depends where they are, I guess, and whether it's, it's...
Yeah, I mean, the feasibility's been proven in other councils up and down the country. I think the problem in Pendle is we have a LCC Highways Authority who aren't actively thinking about doing that and don't have the wherewithal to try it out somewhere.
I mean, the normal process would be go through the traffic liaison committee, but nothing happens. Nothing happens. So, I mean, that would just add to the problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you want to do with this one then?
Chairman,
Tom, take it off.
Can I support Tom and sorry, I just had to stand up. Let's ask the county council if they would consider it on a pilot basis.
Right.
I mean, we've got chaos. I want to pick up something on about Springfield Avenue in this, but we've got chaos around various primary schools, and maybe a radical way of looking at it to deter that chaos, which, I mean, it's life-threatening at times, and we've only got to look at Church School on Calvert Road, where the mayhem is it's just amazing, really. So there might be possibilities of doing a pilot.
So you want to ask, can I just be clear, you want to ask county if they will consider a pilot scheme?
Yeah.
For which areas?
Well, just for a school in West Craven.
Oh, a school
I think
in
it's
West
the
Craven.
starting point.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to consider a pilot for here and everywhere.
No.
You need to identify that.
Well, they could assess which were more practical, couldn't they? Give them some options and you're more likely to get a positive answer.
Yeah, so I've got some options.
Yeah. The second thing I'm going to pick up, Chairman, is this on Springfield Avenue, Ely, there used to be the access to Springfield School, but that was blocked up many years ago. There are still yellow lines down, and people are getting parking tickets for parking on these yellow lines that are completely redundant because this is no longer the access into the school. So I wonder if we could just slip this in to ask County Council if they would remove those yellow lines, please.
Where, so Springfield Avenue?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you remember it?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Right, so just going back to yours, Council, can you identify a couple of schools?
Let's have a think outside the meeting, I think.
Sorry?
Let's have a think outside the meeting for that, really.
Well, Joanne's going to need to know.
We just suggested that if the County Council agrees to a pilot, that they evaluate the options for which school would be the most suitable candidate.
Okay, right. Okay. Moving on. B.
Chairman,
Conditional
I raised this 12 months ago. The prime site shelters are a disgrace. The one in Ely Town Centre on Colne Road is falling to bits.
Yeah, it is.
Are absolutely deplorable. There are others, Calvert Road in Balmswick, which have got broken perspex, they've got missing panels, and it's an awful disaster. So I think I'd like to request that we have a comprehensive report on what we can do about those shelters and their maintenance and provision. And the second part of this which again we raised 12 months ago, was the County Council undertook a renewal of bus shelters along the quality bus routes. And the quality bus route extends along the M5 route through Abbey and to Barnoldswick. However, their shelter replacement programme stopped at Oak Street in Colne. So, you know, they've done all along through Nelson and Colne, and then it stops, and all the shelters from that point on are the responsibility either of Prime Site, to do beggar all, or the respective parish or town councils. And it seems iniquitous that that burden is falling on parish and town councils when on the rest of the route the county council have picked up the town. So you know, we asked the question and we resolved to request Lancashire County Council to extend the renewal programme into West Craven. We've never had a response reported to committee, and you get people like myself getting extremely frustrated that shelters are in not the best of nick. And if you go and have a look at the one in South, where you know it looks like, well,
yeah, well I can give you a bit of update. We're currently looking at a three-way agreement between Pendle, Prime Site and LCC to terminate the advertising agreement between Pendle and Prime Site and to transfer ownership from Prime Site to LCC. These include 4 shelters in Barnoldswick, 1 in Abbey and 2 in Kilbrook and Stuff.
right.
So that's the latest info we've got.
And why wasn't that, you know, sent to everybody? When was that?
We haven't got it today.
Right. Has it gone to everybody?
No, well,
She's read.
I've just read it out to you. So it is ongoing.
Why aren't all the committee given this information?
Because I only asked for the updates this afternoon, so there wasn't time. So you can blame me, it's my fault.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, quite.
Right. Okay, so that's the update
So,
on that.
hang on, Chairman. What about the other bus shelters?
Which are currently in the ownership of the parish and town council.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which, in the case of, I'm sorry, Paul, but that one in South is a disgrace.
But that one isn't.
No, that one isn't.
That never has been.
That's not ours. That's
Not theirs.
That's part of that.
It's part of that.
It's not a Prime Site one, is it?
No, yeah. They never. Kelvin and stuff never took it on. It is part of the Prime Site extension. And this has been going on for some time. But it is not. It's nothing to do with Kelvin and stuff.
We weren't able to take on the ones where there was advertising revenue attached to them because we wanted to see some of that and they wouldn't let us have it, so they wouldn't let us have the site. That wouldn't let us have the,
That's Prime Site.
But none of the Prime Site ones were transferred.
No.
not to us, no.
So what's happening with the rest of them?
Good question.
I mean,
I think what we need to do then in this instance is to have a detailed report come back to next month on the bush shelter situation of the bush shelter.
It's also, Chairman, it's fair to say that a lot of the town councils and parish councils were paying Pendle Borough to clean and look after them. Some have at a charge of about £150, I think it is, a year. Other councils have taken it on themselves and not done that.
Okay.
And some of them are stoned, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
report to the next meeting.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, Dockley Road, Calbrook, grass verging, verges and parking issues and...
Yeah, Chairman, I mean, I think this began with the banking which Together Housing are responsible for. So it would probably be appropriate for us to resolve to request Together Housing to undertake appropriate maintenance.
Yeah.
I mean, if we say appropriate, they could duck and dive amongst that. The other substantive issue here is in relation to planning permissions, which it is claimed the conditions weren't adhered to. So unfortunately, I think that bit is fielded to Neil to think whether the conditions have been discharged. And then there are some highway trees dropping our branches, so can we send that to our one day a week tree person to get him to have a look at it?
Okay. Yeah.
Just to help Neil along, I mean, that condition was going to cut into that banking and create a wider aspect for cars to park, but it was linked to the fact that that old developer went bust. And of course that area has been left, some of it without lighting and so forth, but that's probably the reason why that was never done, and nor was the budget. I don't think you actually got the money for it anyway, but you check on that, I'm sure.
We didn't, I'm sure we didn't.
But, so that's, it comes up every year, David. It is one of those things. I had a look at the trees. There are some trees there that are near, they're in the verge, if you call it a verge. They do need some attention. And together, certainly we're missing some respects in terms of cutting the grass and letting it grow and all of that. But it's that patch in front of the social housing.
Yeah. If it comes up every year, why don't we do something about it?
Well, because the same reason as before, that it is one particular area, one gentleman, and he would like the banking to be cut away and parking to be put there. Well, that's never going to happen, David. The same way as we came up with the problems of getting all of the estate boxed off in terms of making it fit for purpose in terms of lighting and so on, was never going to get there. The biggest issue that he's complaining about is the grass is left long, so when he tries to park his car, it sets off he doesn't know how near to the curb he can get before he can park it. So I'm saying the thing is a perennial, and the issue is the money isn't there to cut into that, to do that work, because the company went bust.
Well,
but in terms of their ongoing maintenance, yeah, it's together housing.
I mean, in terms of sort of development of roads on housing developments, the general case is that it's previously been the case that a bond is placed with the county council, and the county council pick that up if the developers don't finish off the road. And we did that at Robinson Fold in Barnsley, where the county council had to come in and do the job, called in the bond. So are we saying that there wasn't a bond?
I've no idea. It was that 20 odd years ago.
Yeah.
Before.
Is there any way we can find that out? Would we still have records?
Can we resolve to ask
find that out if there was a bond?
And whether there is still a possibility.
Okay.
Because they've got to put the bond on.
Yeah, I understand.
Up front.
Yeah,
it's not afterwards.
I understand.
But if there was a bond 20 years ago, it ain't going to be.
It'll earn a lot of interest. To cope with the inflation.
Yeah, okay. We'll find out. That's a good point. Okay, item 18, outstanding issues, traffic issues, Skipton Road, Barwick. We're still waiting for a response from Matt Hargreaves.
Have we chased him up?
Yes. Yeah, he is not. He's basically ignoring us, isn't he?
No, I did speak to him.
Oh, did you? Sorry.
He just said the problem is resources.
Could we ask him
hang on a minute.
He's wondering whether maybe it might be an idea for Scott Worley from our engineering team to have a discussion with Matt and between them maybe look at bringing something back. But it's not going to be some of the bigger things that are wanted in that area. He just said there aren't the resources available. So he said it's not that it's never going to happen, but it could be on the outstanding item for a long time. So
Tim,
hang on, Councillor Tommy wanted to go.
So I mean, really, we're not wanting him to come back and say, you know, I've identified something, I'm going to action it. We just want the identified part of that. So if he's got things that he's thought about and he can't fund, I think we would like to see them as options for if we could get something together. Because I mean, we had several ideas in the discussion with him. If we included a few of them, sort of went like this to some of them, and if we could see the options available, it might help develop things further. And yeah, with Scott Worley that'd be great, because then he'll be able to get some engineering.
I think the problem is he hasn't got the resources to look properly at the options. That's why I was thinking that maybe the engineering team. So I think maybe if we try to bring something back to the next meeting after Scott's talked to Matt.
We're earlier in the meeting the engineering team at Pendle are chasing the tails. You know, the Wentcliffe Drive issues, they haven't been able to progress that because of other work. I mean, is it really the way forward for the county council who do have traffic engineers to ask the district council who don't have traffic engineers to do their job for them? I don't think we're going down the right route there.
No, well, to get asked Scott to do it, he's, like I said, he's going to be on the list. And top of the list is Wentcliffe.
Well, so, I mean, this is, for George's benefit, this is where Mike Whittingham tended to the person that passed away. If Mike Whittingham were here, it would be, it will be furious that we still haven't made any progress. I mean, a simple thing like the speed indicator device that's supposed to, you know, flash up, slow down, still isn't working. And he said that, you know, he could get that repaired. And we're talking, what? I mean, it's at least 6 months ago since we met with them.
Yeah.
Why can't that be done? I mean, I realise...
We'll ask him again. We can ask him again.
Well, but why can't... I mean, it's a rhetorical question, but, you know, why on earth, given that we have a sign that is supposed to be safety, to slow people down, and we told the county council that innumerable times, why isn't it getting repaired?
You want to answer for that?
We want answers.
It's a direct question with a direct answer. I think they'll say it's nothing to do with them, but there we go. It's a bit of a motive subject at the minute. Who actually has responsibility for it? But I think you just have to ask them. Right, it needs maintaining. Who's going to do it?
Oh, yeah. It's the county council that put it in.
I understand that, though. I really do. But I think the other villages have got a major problem with it in terms of who's taking ownership of them and who's going to actually maintain them.
Can I just interrupt you? Can I just interrupt you a second?
Sorry,
Paul's going there. Can I just ask you a question regarding the water supply pressure?
As far as I'm aware, people at the top of the road have reported that they do have water pressure.
So everything's back to normal?
It seems to be okay on that so far. I haven't done a full scientific survey of the residents, but those that came to our last parish council meeting that lived at the top of Waterloo, just along a bit further, reported that they did seem to have pretty decent water pressure.
Great.
So,
okay, thanks for that.
Thank you. Sorry, I do have to leave.
No worries. Okay. Right, where were we?
Asking to LCC.
Asking LCC.
Are they going to maintain it? Are they going to put it right? Or if they're not, who is?
Yeah.
Just adding to that, to the request to LCC, I mean, there's a technique called tactical urbanism, which means you can solve an engineering problem without having to do an engineer go through studies after study. So if we could get, you know, a local group to do this tactical urbanism, would LCC allow us to do that? Just a request.
Ask the question.
Ask the question.
They'll probably say
We'll
no.
ask the question.
They'll probably say
Probably say no.
fully accept that.
Health and safety
Well,
comes from health.
I mean, David mentioned about concentric. I know the issue that they're going around the villages there trying to get. They've got the money.
Yeah.
They want to buy these skids, but they cannot get anybody who's going to take ownership of them to maintain them from that point on.
Well, I'm not. I refer to a spit. It isn't a spit. It's what you would call it, interactive sign.
Yeah.
And it's a permanent fixture.
I know.
And it was installed as part of the safety audit following the installation of the zebra crossing.
Yeah.
So it is a county council asset. You know, no possible
definitive response.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then let's move on. B, C, and D. At the last meeting, we asked Councillor Ahmed write to the leader of LCC on all these three issues. That letter has gone, so we're waiting for a response on that one. Water pressure we've done. Back Myrtle Grove.
Nothing there.
There's a meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a meeting tomorrow with LCC about that one.
Between
Property Services, Tony Brown's meeting, Property Services and meeting LCC.
Wow. Jennifer at the site visit said that LCC was saying it weren't theirs, which I go forward in disbelief. But if it weren't theirs, we'll acquire it by.
Oh. So,
I have an email with it done. I haven't deleted it.
Victoria Road reflagging scheme.
Policy and resources at the end of this month.
It's going at the end of this month. Eby Town Council have said they will contribute to the scheme, but they haven't said how much.
He said, I've got his email, right, because he said they don't want to get into the whole events area because they want to push the paving because it's such a problem. There's a lot of complaints at the moment. He said, and if you add something else on now, it might take even slower because the paving's quite an issue. I've had a few people this last week who've had near accidents and everything on it, and he said it's just slowing it down more and more. They said that would be something they'd be interested in looking at after, but they want to keep it separate for the time being.
Okay. So have they said how much they will contribute yet? No.
Well, I'm sure they didn't. I don't think they actually all agreed to contribute. Yeah. So.
Sounds about right, Amanda.
Yeah.
I've got a note saying here the town council said they will contribute to the scheme.
Is it 2 and 6?
But they haven't said how much.
Agree in principle.
Okay.
But it's
Could we ask you, Amanda, if you could ask them?
I'll find out.
And fetch it back to his next meeting.
Right.
Okie dokie, so wait for that. Okay, item 19, exclusion of public and press. Alright, you need to go, please.
What did they say? Somebody give Jennifer a lift home.
Can't you make him an honorary councillor?
No, you won't let him speak.
I've found the magic one for that.
Right.